We're sick.
Hello, and welcome to the Generally Croaky podcast.
We tried to get better.
Yeah.
And then record. We just can't.
Yeah, we normally record this on a Monday.
At least a Monday, if not earlier than that.
But we've been sick on Monday, like, oh, well, we'll be better by Tuesday, so we'll record it then. And then Wednesday. And now this is Thursday night, and we need this ready for tomorrow. And we're going, oh, no.
Yeah. We couldn't have done it any sooner.
No.
I thought I was going to die yesterday.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Ailey's more sick than I am. Feasibly, I could have just fallen asleep over here. No one would ever know.
I would have noticed. Yeah, both Kieran and I are quite sick. And we're hoping that the episode will still be enjoyable to listen to. But you can probably hear that I'm not very well.
Yeah, but through the power of preservation and the coffee we've made ourselves.
Yes, I'm having a lovely coffee out of one of our generally spooky mugs. I have a bag of Frutella sweeties because I'm sick. And I'm going to eat them whenever I want.
Yep.
I may need to stop to blow my nose and cough. See, it's already blocked.
I'll edit that out, though. You won't have to listen to constant nose blowing and coughing.
Kieran will.
I will. I can get rid of it all. I've got us, guys. Got it covered. Do I sound sick? I probably sound sick.
No, you sound a lot better than you were.
Yes.
Because Kieran had his turn of feeling really sick. And now I'm having my turn of feeling really sick.
Yeah, we've successfully alternated since Saturday.
We're a good team.
I know, right?
We're a good team. And yeah, it's been almost a week.
I know.
It's not COVID.
No, check. It's not COVID. It's just regular run-of-the-mill feeling shit.
Yeah, it's a proper head cold flu. Yeah. It's been miserable.
It's annoying because I had my flu vaccine, but
I didn't.
What can you do?
I didn't.
Ooh.
Well, I mean, I'm not eligible particularly.
No.
I was going to say it's not that I've dodged it, but I'm scared of needles, so maybe I am dodging it.
Maybe you did dodge it.
So yes, we are going to do our very best to make this an enjoyable episode for you.
Yes.
Even though it should probably be in bed.
We can't miss the deadline. No,
we want to bring you episodes on schedule.
Yes.
It's important.
We are committed to you.
Before we get into it, you, if you're listening to this, should join us on Patreon.
Yes.
Because we are having such a good time over there. We're posting so much extra content over there. Mm-hmm. We have our weekly blether, where we usually chat about whatever we've talked about in the podcast. So you get a little bit extra, a little bit of personal spice. Mm-hmm. Last week we chatted about conspiracy theories.
We did. That was good fun.
Which was fun. And if you join now, you get, depending on what tier you join, you get access to the entire back catalogue of things we've posted on Patreon.
Yeah.
So if you enjoy the podcast, you should really be joining us over there.
Yeah. And if you want to help support an awesome husband-wife creative team
who are sick
to do what they love, and we're sick. We need your sympathy.
We need money for...
Send money to help sick Scottish people.
For hot water bottles and tea.
Which you can enjoy from Bird and Blend.
We do have a surplus of tea. That's probably not fair.
Yeah.
We have a lot.
And if you'd like some tea, you can use the Bird and Blend link in the description. It is a very good time. Mm-hmm. Might be UK only. I'm not sure. I'll need to check.
I'm not sure what their shipping is. If you're in the UK, it's super fast.
Yes.
Yes, it is. I would also like to take a minute, because this is the first time we've recorded since the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah.
We fully support Ukraine.
Yes, we do.
And everything that the Ukrainian people are going through right now is appalling. To a point, even the things that the Russian people are going through right now are appalling.
Yeah.
The protesters who are being arrested. It's all awful. I've shared a few different places on Instagram where you can donate either money, or if you live locally to Inverness, there are lots of places that are accepting donations of supplies, first aid, things for babies, for infants. And I assume that they're doing a similar thing in lots of different cities, not just here. So do your research, find out where you can help, and I would highly recommend that you do.
That was Odin giving his support also.
So yeah, I'm trying to share places where you can support the Ukrainian people and offer your help. So you check Instagram for that, but they're everywhere.
Yes, at Generally Spooky.
Yes, on Instagram. But I just want to say that before we get going.
Sounds good.
This is the first time we've recorded since it happened.
Yeah. Well, let's roll some music.
Yeah.
Hey. So, what historical delights do you have for us today?
If you follow us on Instagram, you probably have an idea of what we're going to be talking about today already, because I posted some photos from our visit.
Wait, I was on that visit.
Yes, you were.
Wait, I know what today's episode is.
You do. You
oh
do.
My god, I'm such a liar.
This week, we are talking about Stirling Castle.
Woo!
Which we actually got to go and visit, which I really loved.
Yes, we did.
It was a really great time, and it was really interesting. I loved it. Really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. It was a really good day. Horrible weather.
Yeah.
Because it's Scotland in February.
Well, and it was also right before the storm came in.
Yes, there was Storm Eunice, I think.
I can't remember which one. There was like
There's
three in a row.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll talk about our visit throughout the episode as things come back to us and as we remember things. We didn't manage to do a ghost tour this time, like we did for Greyfriars, which was a shame. Unfortunately, we missed it. We were down on the wrong day.
Mm-hmm.
David Kinnaird runs the Stirling Ghost Walk, and I was really lucky to get to chat with him over email. I asked him some questions about his time leading the tours and telling ghost stories in Stirling. I also bought his book called Haunted Stirling, which I am looking forward to getting into. But just right at the top, I want to thank him for taking the time to speak to me. It was great, and he shared some of his own podcast episodes with me, which you can find on Patreon, and I will have a link in various descriptions that you can find. So thank you, David, and I'm really sorry we didn't get to meet up for a coffee, and we didn't get to go on your ghost tour, because I was very excited.
I know, that would have been good. We'll get it. We'll get it again.
Yeah.
Was that his podcast is available on his Patreon?
Yes.
Got you.
Yes, he has his own Patreon. I think the name of the podcast is Ghosts and Bogles.
Yeah.
But that could be wrong. I'll have the right one in episode descriptions and things like that.
That makes sense.
Well, he has his own Patreon, and that's where all his episodes are available.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So here we go. Stirling Castle.
Stirling Castle, y'all. So, where is Stirling Castle?
Well, Kieran, it's up your butt.
What's it doing there?
It's a pretty major hub of Scottish history, Stirling Castle.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of Scottish kings and queens lived there. They ruled from there. And similar to what we said when we were talking about Roslin Castle, Stirling Castle is very strategically important. It's built on a big hill, and kind of similar to Roslin, it's got sheer drops on almost every side. So with Roslin, it's high up a bit, but it's surrounded by the river.
Mm.
Stirling has these big sheer rock faces.
It's very striking. The view from the top in the courtyard is quite something.
You can see for a long way, which is ideal for a fortress. Makes it easy to keep. The hill itself that Stirling Castle is built on is around 350 million years old. That's
pretty good.
Right?
So to that bit of rock, this castle on it's just like a pimple.
Yeah.
It's not got around to bursting yet.
Oh God, it's so ugly. It's taking up my whole face.
What is that? Ew.
Now, long before the castle was actually built, not as long ago as 350 million years.
Somewhere in between.
But not as long ago as that. The hill was apparently occupied by an ancient tribe called the Métis. I'm probably saying that wrong, but it's spelled Maeatae. Which in my head looks like Meate.
Yeah, that seems fair.
To me. And to give you some context, they were around the same time as the Romans were. So that's the period of history that we're in. And they seem to have been a group of several different tribes who all came together against the foreign invaders.
The Romans.
Who were the Romans? And it seems like they were one of the intimidating, scary, heebie-jeebie forces that lived beyond the Antonine Wall, which is different to Hadrian's Wall. There are two walls. The Antonine Wall was built further north than Hadrian's Wall to keep the ancient Scottish people out of the Roman Empire.
Very nice, very nice. So we'll just keep on that side, eh?
Yeah, they didn't really want to tangle eventually they tried it and they're like, no.
That's fair. Well, I guess while they were building, or shortly after that, they got the Antonine Plague in Rome, which is presumably a similar Antonine.
Built in the time of Antony?
Yeah.
Maybe we should do an episode on the Romans and Scotland.
That would be fun.
Might be interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Antonine Wall goes pretty much from Glasgow to Edinburgh.
Oh, cool.
It stretches across one of the narrower parts of Scotland.
Well, that's sensible.
If you look at that, the distance between Glasgow and Edinburgh on the map, it is where the country is like most narrow east to west.
Mm-hmm.
And there are parts of the wall that are still visible. You can still go and visit it, but a lot of it has been grown over, so it's just kind of grassy mounds where the wall used to be.
That makes sense.
As you'd expect, because Roman times were a very long time ago. And like I was saying, the Meaitae had a fort near the hill that Stirling Castle is built on now. I think archaeologists have uncovered parts of it, like remains of this fort. But it's kind of like when you look at the Picts, a lot of things that we don't know the full reasons for, we don't understand everything that we find. We can just sort of date the evidence we find that people were living there at this time.
I suppose a lot of stuff that would have been there, because you've talked before about how castles weren't normally the first thing in these locations. But I imagine the people who built the castle cleared everything away. So everything now that would have been of like super historical interest, I imagine they got rid of a lot of it to build the castle.
To a point, or just built on top of it.
Yeah.
That's quite common. That when you look under the foundations, it's like in Orkney when we were looking at Scale House.
Oh, yeah.
They looked underneath Scale House, and that was where they found a whole load of historical artifacts. They've just been built on top.
Crazy.
I can't imagine doing that.
I know.
Especially when you build over like graveyards and burial sites and stuff. It gives me the creeps.
It's weird. Well, it's weird that it was only in like the 18 and 1900s. People were like, maybe we should like look after these historical places.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk a bit about that with Stirling Castle, actually.
Ooh.
That very phenomenon. There are also legends within the Roman era that Agricola, who was a famous Roman general, you might know Kieran, but most people don't.
No.
Because Kieran loves the ancient Romans. There's legends that Agricola fortified Castle Hill when the Romans were trying to invade Scotland and move north. He was the guy who was in charge of a lot of the Roman invasion efforts in Britain.
Very cool, very cool.
So there are legends that he tried to keep and take Stirling Castle.
Well, that's not too much further north than the Antonine Wall.
Not Stirling Castle, the hill.
Yeah.
He tried to keep the hill.
Would make sense. Be very, very powerful if he did have it.
It's a good place to defend.
Yeah.
Another story says that the legendary Scottish king, Kenneth MacAlpin, besieged Stirling at one point when he was fighting the Picts. So this is way, way, way back.
Very cool.
Way back when Scotland was divided up into different territories that belonged to different tribes of people. So you had the Picts and the Gaels, which I won't get too into here because it's not hugely relevant. But this gives you an idea of how long people have been living in and around Stirling.
Yeah.
MacAlpin was around during the 9th century.
Oh, wow.
So the year 800 to 900. So people have been there a long time.
That is a long time.
And the reason for this is the geography of the area makes it very important. The hills around Stirling make it difficult, or back then it's easier now, they made it difficult to travel north and south through Scotland without going through it.
Oh, yeah, that does make a lot of sense.
That you kind of had to pass through Stirling. It was the only like navigable route. Because you have all the hills, which would make your journey a lot longer and a lot more dangerous.
Yeah, well, even now, there's not that many main roads going north. Like, you can kind of go round the coast or through the middle. There's not a ton of choice of different ways you can go.
Not easy ones, anyway.
No, and that's with modern roads and cars. So you're trying to follow a path on a horse.
So Stirling became a really important juncture in any journey if you're travelling north and south. And even going east to west, it was important. Before there were bridges, it was the best place to cross the Firth of Forth.
Oh, yeah.
Before modern bridges, anyway, because I think it's narrower there. I can't remember. But it's very important. It's an important place. strategically, everyone wants Stirling and everyone wants to be in Stirling.
Place to be.
By the time King Alexander I was King of Scotland, Stirling Castle had been built. There was a castle on the site. And we know this because there are written records from Alexander's reign that he wanted a chapel built there. And these documents are from 1110.
Very cool.
So Stirling Castle, in some form, has been around for nearly 1,000 years.
Wild. It's so hard to comprehend that, isn't it?
Isn't that crazy?
Mm-hmm.
Nearly. Not quite.
Will be soon.
Obviously, it's changed over time.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not the same as it was then. Over time, from King Alexander's reign, Stirling became a hub for Scottish royalty, like I said. And all was well until 1286.
So all was well until it wasn't.
Pretty much. That's just history.
Yeah. And everything was fine, so there's not much to say. It was good and that. Send a wee postcard, having a nice time.
Well, 1286 is when the Scottish King Alexander III died.
Ooh.
We've talked about him before. I wonder at what point the light bulb is going to go. He was don't pull that face. You've been here. You've been listening.
I've already forgotten his name.
Alexander III.
Alexander III.
He died.
He
was 44, so
it's all right.
Young-ish. And his reign had its issues. He married the daughter of Henry III of England.
Okay.
And because he did this, Henry felt that he was owed allegiance and fealty from Alexander because he'd married his daughter. He wanted Alexander to treat him as his overlord. And Alexander wouldn't do that, which caused issues. The big problems of Alexander's reign, though, happened towards the end of his life. Now, he'd been widowed, but he had 3 children with his wife, Margaret, who I mentioned. However, all of his children died before he did.
Oh, no.
Which is nerve-wracking for the whole country. That's not a good position you want to be in.
And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. On a personal level, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even on the wider level, it's difficult because he has died without a direct heir, which it makes the country vulnerable.
Do they do some sort of ultimate beastmaster situation to decide?
It might make things easier.
Yeah.
It's like we were saying about the Norwegian way of doing things where the king would just choose who was best.
Oh, yeah. Or just everyone goes into the Thunderdome.
You should have seen Kieran and I. We were watching some of the Beijing Olympics and we saw the 2 brothers from Ultimate Beastmaster in the rock climbing at the Olympics, and it was like we knew them personally. We were so excited.
You should watch that on Netflix. It's like an obstacle course running.
But season 2, season 2. Season 1 isn't as good. Season 2 has the French brothers
Yep, it's
who
a good time.
were in the Olympics last year, and I was so proud. Before he died, Alexander had been trying to make sure that his granddaughter, Margaret, who is known as the Maid of Norway, was officially named as his successor. And he was trying to secure an heir before his death. But he died unexpectedly in the end because he fell off his horse.
Ooh.
It's quite sad, really. He was riding through a storm at night because he wanted to go and see his wife. I think he'd remarried at this point. He wanted to go see his wife because it was going to be her birthday the next day, and he wanted to be there. And he ignored the advice from the people around him, like not to travel, it's too stormy outside. He went anyway, and they found him, I think, the next day, and he'd broken his neck. He'd fallen off his horse. Isn't that sad?
That is really sad.
Trying to be with his wife.
I can think of better birthday presents
I know.
than a dead spouse.
If it was that bad, I would want you just to stay where you were.
I know, eh?
You just have to make it up to me. Margaret was recognised as his heir.
Oh.
And I'm pretty sure this happened before he actually died. He managed to get it all together. And she was brought from Norway to Scotland to be crowned as queen in 1290. Now, she was only 7. She was really young. And she was lined up to marry King Edward of England's son.
Yep.
So she's on her way over. She's supposed to marry the Prince of England. She's going to be Queen of Scotland. But then tragedy struck again.
Uh-oh.
Because Margaret never made it to Scotland.
Oh no.
She died in Orkney,
Oh.
which was still ruled by Norway at this time.
Oh, yeah.
Which we've talked about. I can't remember what they thought she had some kind of illness. I can't remember what illness they suspected. Maybe TB?
That's a shame.
Or typhoid? I don't know. She died, which left Scotland almost completely without an heir to the throne. Now, we've talked a lot about what happened next, because King Edward I of England was asked to come in and mediate discussions and plans for who would take the throne. There it is. There's the light bulb.
There's the light bulb. I remember that. Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
That's how that all came about.
Was that the Mary Queen of Scots episode? I can't remember what episode
We've talked about it a few times.
Yeah. Yes. I am up to date.
And yeah, that didn't go well. King Edward basically took the piss and wanted the throne of Scotland for himself.
Yeah. Right. Okay, I'll decide.
Yeah.
I pick me.
Well, that, and like he took control of all Scottish castles and all kinds of things. He chose John Balliol as king because he felt like he could control him, and that's what he wanted. He wanted to grab as much power as he could while he had the chance. Eventually...
Sounds like something else happening just now.
There's too much discord happening right there just now. I can't even deal with it right now. Eventually, the Scottish nobles created an agreement with France against England.
The old alliance.
Yes, which sent King Edward off the deep end and started the Wars of Scottish Independence, which we talked about last week.
With Alex Salmond and that.
No.
David Cameron.
No.
Oh, yeah, wrong one, sorry.
But we're going to talk about it a bit more again today because Stirling Castle and the surrounding area played a huge part in the Wars of Scottish Independence because it's strategically important and, you know, a place that everyone wants to control.
Yep.
So it wasn't too much of a tangent. It was all coming back around.
It comes back around.
All coming back.
We've had bigger tangents.
That's just me and you, just chatting shit. King Edward took control of Stirling Castle fairly early on in the wars because it's important. But in 1297, it was taken back by the Scots during the Battle of Stirling Bridge. Have you heard of this battle?
I don't think so, no.
Very interesting. I want to talk about it in detail. Kieran and I have been chatting about maybe doing a whole series just about the Wars of Independence because there's a lot, and there's a lot of key figures.
They sound pretty badass too.
So we're debating a whole series. So you can let us know what you think about that. So I'm not going to get too into detail here because this is already a very long episode. And it didn't actually happen at Stirling Castle. It just happened in view of it.
Oh, okay.
And they were fighting to take the castle. But this was a huge victory for the Scots.
Yes.
Which is nice to hear. And they were led by William Wallace and Andrew Murray. I'm hoping you've heard at least one of those names before.
Well, I was thinking how famous William Wallace is and how I don't really know Andrew Murray.
Andrew Murray was kind of his second.
I wonder if he's pissed. Well, you know William Wallace, though. Like, well, I'm basically William Wallace.
He's dead. I'm pretty sure, though, Andrew Murray was a Highlander. He came from up here.
Very cool.
As far as I know. Yeah, hopefully you know at least one of those names.
I do. I do.
And what they did was they basically set a trap for the English forces. And they trapped them over the River Forth.
Oh, nice.
Like, they couldn't go anywhere. And they were just slaughtered, basically. War is hell.
Yeah.
That's what happened. And it happened almost in view of the castle. It was near Abbey Craig, which is where the Wallace Monument is.
Oh, okay.
Now, if you're in Stirling. The castle was lost back to the English the next year in 1298 because the Scots lost the Battle of Falkirk. So the English took back the castle. And there's going to be a lot of yo-yoing here. The amount of times that the castle passed from the Scots to the English is insane. So don't worry if you don't keep up with it. Basically, all you need to know is that it bounced between the two, and I'll tell you some of the gory details.
Sounds good.
In 1299, the castle was taken back by the Scots. Now, they had sieged the castle, which happened often, and they actually allowed the English soldiers to leave after their surrender, which it followed the standard protocols for war. This was the done thing. If they surrendered, they were allowed to leave. You could go in and take the castle.
Very nice, very nice.
But then, in 1304, the war was going really badly for the Scots.
It's a long time. What's that, 7 years so far? Longer? 97, did you say?
7 or 8 years.
Damn.
Yeah, they happened over a long time, and there's loads of battles.
Yeah.
Which is why I kind of want to do a whole series on them. Because I'm not doing them, I can't do them justice, even in just an episode.
Crazy.
Like I was saying, by 1304, things aren't going well for the Scots. They only really had control of Stirling Castle left, because the English had taken everything else. This was the last holdout for them. The English sieged the castle, because that was one of the only ways you could take the castle, because it's so well defended.
Yep.
And eventually the Scots were forced into a surrender. However, the reason I bring this up, the reason it's unique and quite horrible, is that King Edward wouldn't accept their surrender.
That's not so good.
He comes off as kind of like a spoilt child here, but he has way too much power.
Oh, no.
He wouldn't accept their surrender and wouldn't let them leave the castle because he wanted to use Warwolf. Now, have you heard of Warwolf before?
Is it a big trebuchet?
It's a trebuchet.
Oh.
It was his new trebuchet, which is a war weapon. If you're not familiar, you can use the big wooden frame to throw huge projectiles
It's kind
at
of
buildings. It's a siege weapon.
It's a big catapult thing.
Yeah, and he wanted to try it out for the first time on Stirling Castle, which he did, which is why he wouldn't let them leave. He fired Warwolf at the walls of the castle with the Scots still inside.
Jeez,
And it was only after he got to play with his toy that they were allowed to come out of the castle and then were humiliated in front of everyone.
Yeah. Do you think anyone told him that? So, well, we can't do it after they surrender. Then we're attacking our own building. I'm like, well, we're about to own this building. We don't really want it to have been sieged.
I know. It's ridiculous. But he just wanted to try it.
Yeah.
He wanted to use it. He brought it all that way.
Boys.
I'm surprised that you haven't heard of Warwolf before.
It
seems like the type of thing that a lot of young boys would be interested in learning about.
Well, I was interested in trebuchets generally. I guess if it's used to humiliate the Scots.
Maybe you didn't come across
it. Or I did and was just like, that guy's an asshole.
Maybe. Well, that asshole died in 1307.
Oh.
So 3 years later.
Not long after.
Which was kind of a relief for everyone. It wasn't the end of the fighting, but it caused a major shift in the fortunes of the English forces and the English army. By the time we reach 1313, so 6 years later, things are finally going in the Scots' favour.
Yay!
Robert the Bruce is the King of Scots, so we have him as our leader.
We like him.
By 1313, Stirling Castle is being sieged again, but by the Scots this time.
Good.
Now, I was surprised when I read this part, looking into all my research, but the leaders of the Scottish and English forces came to an agreement. They were on either side of this siege. And they basically agreed that if English forces didn't appear to save the castle and take it from the Scots by the 24th of June, 1314, the English would surrender the castle to the Scots. They didn't want the siege anymore. But the Scottish forces had to end the siege by this date. They couldn't keep terrorising them.
Interesting.
Oh no, I've explained that all wrong. Hang on. They come together, they negotiate that if the English army doesn't arrive to liberate the castle by the 24th of June, 1314, then the English would surrender the castle to the Scots. But on the Scots side, to honour this agreement, they had to end the siege immediately. So they wouldn't siege the castle anymore, they would leave the English alone. But if more reinforcements didn't come by that date, they would just hand over the castle.
Interesting. Is that like a year later, if it's 1314?
I don't know if it's a full year, but it's the following year.
So it's quite a long time.
I never knew that.
That's really weird.
And it's a big decision, because this is a decision that basically led to the Battle of Bannockburn.
Oh.
That's
okay.
why the battle happened.
Oh.
That was the English army coming to fight the Scots.
For Stirling Castle.
Yes.
Interesting.
And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a Scottish person who hasn't heard of the Battle of Bannockburn.
No.
I never knew that. I never knew that was kind of the impetus for the battle.
I didn't know that either. That's really interesting.
Right? Really interesting.
It's almost more like it's very diplomatic.
It is. It's an agreement, right? No more death, no more sieging. Here's what we'll do.
Yeah.
Here's how we'll resolve it.
Interesting.
So the Scottish and English armies collided at Bannockburn. Again, almost within view of Stirling Castle. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to get too into that this episode. And if you didn't know, this was a pretty major victory for the Scots and for Robert the Bruce, who was leading the Scottish army as king.
Robbie Beale.
He sort of... It was a bit of a gamble at Bannockburn because he's meeting the English army on an open field, which they hadn't really done up until then, because that was where the English army had their strength, was in the cavalry and the charge and all of that. But I think it was the conditions of Bannockburn they weren't ready for. It was quite boggy, so the English weren't prepared.
Yes.
I think they deliberately set up the battle so that the English would have to go through the bog.
That's possibly what happens in Outlaw King.
That's about Robert the Bruce.
Yeah, I think they might have that battle in it. Ooh.
You can't really talk about Robert the Bruce without talking about Bannockburn.
No.
So, King Edward II, by this point, King Edward I died. This is his son. King Edward II suffered a humiliating defeat. But he tried to be sneaky.
Can't trust an Englishman.
That's a bit harsh. He tried to be sneaky. He tried to retreat his forces to Stirling Castle and hold them up in the castle and not return it, which was the agreement.
Shit.
He was going to just keep it
Life.
instead of handing it over. But a man called Philip Mowbray, he was the one who made the agreement from the English side. He was in charge of the forces at Stirling Castle. He wouldn't cave in to King Edward's demands.
Damn.
I think I read somewhere that he wouldn't let the king in.
That is quite something.
He upheld the agreement that he'd made with the Scottish people. And then he joined the Scots. He defected. Because he was so outraged by what the king tried to do. Like, he tried to go back on the agreement that Philip had made. So when he handed over Stirling Castle, he joined the Scots.
Crazy.
Because he had actually tried to tell King Edward not to fight Bruce at Bannockburn. He said it was a bad idea. He listed all his reasons. But the king didn't listen. So after that, and then him trying to go back on the agreement, he defected.
Well, he clearly has no respect for him. So fair enough.
I feel like that would get quite a lot of soldiers of that time if you're not abiding by like the rules of war, like the sportsmanship of war.
Yeah, honour.
Now we're in 1336.
Okay, so like
we've covered a lot of time, but we've got a lot of time to go.
We've got 700 more years to go here.
We're in 1336.
Yep.
King Alexander III only died in 1286. So we've only covered 50 years.
Oh, man.
And a lot has happened.
Well, gotta get the pace up. Come on.
You know what I mean? Like, that's a lot of history to happen in just 50 years. After the English retreated from Stirling Castle, Robert the Bruce had the defences of the castle destroyed.
Huh.
Even though it was his castle and they had won.
Does he think he's going to lose it?
Well, his thinking was, and let me know what you think about this. His thinking was, if the defences weren't there at all, and then the castle were to be taken in the future, the English couldn't keep it the way that they had been in the past.
Yeah.
He had been seeing the history of sieges and everything, and he thought this would be a way to stop that from happening.
You know what? I think that's fair play. Because it would be very Well, it'd be very bold to claim that you would never lose the castle when it had been lost so many times, presumably by competent people who were fit to hold it. If they'd all lost it, it would be a lot to say, like, well, I'm never going to lose it. It's very, very forward thinking. I like it. I like it.
In a way, he made the castle vulnerable, but sort of gave himself strength.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
I like that.
But in 1336, like I was saying, this is where we are now.
Yep.
The castle was taken by the English again.
Oh my God.
And part of the reason for this was there were issues in Scotland after Robert the Bruce died. And around the similar time, Edward II was forced to give up the throne to his very young son. And this meant that there were two young, inexperienced men on the thrones of Scotland and England. And people were always going to take advantage of that. So there's a lot of discord happening in both courts, both thrones. So they were at war again, basically. In 1342, Robert the Bruce's son, Robert II, retook Stirling Castle.
Good man, good man. Don't tell me he put the defences back in.
I don't think so. I can't speak to that, but I don't think so. Robert II's older brother, David, had been exiled by Edward III, even though he was the heir to the throne. So this is part of the back and forth that was happening between Scotland and England at this time.
Where was he exiled to? Do you know?
I think France. I can't remember, though. I think France. I know it's confusing and it's difficult to keep up with the back and forth. But you don't have to keep track of everything, just as long as you know that it's past hands a lot.
Just letting the history wash over me.
Yeah, just enjoy it. Enjoy it. We're now in 1424.
Okay, yep.
We've skipped 100 years. So we're just doing the good bits.
Wait, is this the gondola of time?
No, I told you, we can't.
Okay.
We can't ride the gondola of time.
I'm distrusting.
And I am absolutely not talking from experience. That is not how I get my information. Just saying. 1424, and we're now in the reign of King James I.
Okay.
Of Scotland, not of England. You look confused.
Yeah, I was thinking of the sixth and James the sixth and first.
Not him.
I couldn't remember which he was the first of. Is this him? Is he first of Scotland and sixth of England?
No, other way around.
Yep.
Other way around. This is James I.
This is 5 Jameses prior.
Yes. His life was pretty full of murder and peril.
Mine too.
No, it is not.
Hey, I'm sick. That was perilous.
It's not full of murder.
Murder that steak,
No, King James I did not have an easy time.
Okay.
He was kidnapped and held in England for many years. His brother was murdered. It's not easy. It's not easy being a king.
No.
He married an English noblewoman while he was in England being held in 1424 called Joan Beaufort. Beaufort. And then when he was married, he was allowed to return to Scotland.
Oh, very good. Very good, very good.
But he was raised as an Englishman, and now he was married to an Englishwoman. So the Scots didn't really take to him very well.
Well, it's almost cruel sending him back to Scotland after that.
And at one point, he had gone to war for King Henry, who was King of England at the time, which put him against the Scots. He had fought against them. So they didn't really like that.
I can see that.
That he fought on the side of the English. When he got married to Joan, he gave her Stirling Castle.
Oh.
As part of their marriage agreement.
Very cool. That's pretty good going.
I didn't get a castle when we got married.
Nope.
Just saying.
I wondered if he gave her a measuring instrument for wind, and then she invented the Beaufort scale.
Oh, Kieran. I had no idea what you were talking about.
Did she wind test the castle though?
No.
Pressure test it, sorry. So it doesn't blow down.
No. No.
Nope, you just got me when you got married.
It's okay though, you make me tea. You've helped look after me while I've not been well.
Yep, although you made this coffee, but yes.
I did. But, on the whole, you've made me cups of tea and it's been very nice. You know who's not nice?
James the First.
King James I. He went on and murdered a whole load of Scottish nobles when he came back to the Scottish throne. He kidnapped other nobles who wouldn't do what he wanted, and he wasted a lot of money building himself great big palaces across the country. He wasn't well liked. He didn't really endear himself to anyone. And then he was assassinated in Perth in 1437.
Well, I can see that being a thing.
Yeah, you're not really surprised.
No.
The final straw seems to have been when he got defeated by the English in battle. And his response to that was to raise the taxes of Scottish people so that he could afford to do more war. And they were like, no.
It's easy going, I've spent all my money, give me yours so I can go to war.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're fine, actually.
No, you obviously suck at this.
Yeah. So I can go to war to get more money, to build more palaces for me.
Yeah, pretty much. He was murdered in a sewer tunnel.
Wow.
Did you know that?
I did not know that.
A sewer tunnel. He was trying to escape, but I think the way that he thought he would be able to get out had been sealed, and he didn't know. So he just got trapped in the sewer tunnel and was murdered there, kind of like a rat.
That is wild.
Yeah. His wife Joan was injured in the assassination attempt, but she managed to get away, and she escaped to Stirling Castle, where she was kept safe with her son, who was now the young King James II.
Well, there you go. Mm-hmm. Do you think the two of them were running away together? He was like, quick, let's go in the sewer. And she was like, no. What are we going to do in the sewer? Oh, we'll escape. I was like, well, we can just go down this alleyway and escape.
I would sooner die. Do you think like a carriage just pulled up outside to take them away? And he was like, no, this will be way better.
Wow, this will be a way better story.
And she's just like, I'll see you at home.
Yeah, I'm just going to go. I'm just going to take this horse.
We have a son.
Yeah, you go. I'll distract him. I'll lure him down here. Give him the old 1-2.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing you can't be murdered for talking ill of your monarch now.
Oh, I know, eh?
We've not been kind to the kings and queens of Britain.
No. I appreciate Queenie, though. Our current Queenie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't mind Queenie.
Don't mind Queenie.
I don't mind Queenie.
I'm not... Well, I think I said before, I'm neither a royalist nor an anti-royalist.
You're just kind of neutral.
Yeah, although all these arseholes can go suck a dick, but...
Well, King James II is responsible for one of the bloodiest and most well-known moments in Stirling Castle's history.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, indeed. King James II was responsible for the Douglas murder.
Ooh.
We're getting true crimey in here.
Oh, he didn't just invent, like, decapitation bowling or something?
No. No. So at this time, remember, we're in the mid-1400s.
Yep.
The Douglas clan had a lot of power in Scotland. They had previously had connections to Robert the Bruce, who had been king, and they owned a lot of land. And King James II didn't like this. Because I think at this time they owned the most land in Scotland. They owned the majority of it, which is insane.
That's insane, and it's also still the case.
Yeah, it's like
not the Douglases.
Five people who own
like most of Scotland's land. It's really weird.
It's really dodgy when you look into it. I feel like more should be able to be done because it's not right.
Yeah. Strange.
We should look into it. Anyway, in 1449, King James asked the Douglases to help him secure his marriage to a woman called Mary of Burgundy. And that's Burgundy in France, not Burgundy, the colour. And they did. They agreed to help. They fought for him in a tournament that was held, which was to show that he was worthy of her. I don't really see how that shows that he's worthy. If anything, it shows the Douglases were worthy.
Bit of a weird one.
But, you know, they went to bat for him, basically.
Aye.
And when her father, who was the Duke of Burgundy, agreed to the marriage, this was when James' trouble kind of compounded on himself. Because at first he needed help to fight in the tournament, that was all fine, yada yada. Once the marriage was agreed to, he suddenly had to find a whole load of money to pay for an incredibly lavish wedding. Because he's a king.
Yep.
So it has to be lavish.
Did he? No, his dad spent it all on palaces.
Yeah. And then he was murdered.
This guy was totally different. He spent all his on games and was murdered. Completely different situation.
Along with having a really lavish wedding that was befitting of his daughter, the Duke of Burgundy also insisted that James, and I actually think this is quite smart on his part, as like father of the bride, he insisted that James give his new bride lots of Scottish land and titles, legally. before he would give James her dowry.
Very nice. Yep, that seems fair.
You know what a dowry is?
I do know what a dowry is.
If you don't, it's the fortune, the money that's agreed to be given to the husband when he marries a woman.
Wait a second. I didn't get a dowry. Where's my dowry?
I'm going to refer you to my parents. I really want to see their reaction to that statement.
So what's up with this dowry thing? I never got mine. I mean, I know you weren't invited to the wedding, but
I think my dad would laugh you out the door.
I think so.
Which could be intimidating. He's a big guy. Also, it's not that they weren't invited, we eloped.
Yes. So they sort of weren't invited,
They
but
weren't,
nobody else was either, so
Yeah,
it's fine.
they weren't barred from the wedding, we just eloped.
And to be fair, your dad's like letting me help myself to his tool shed, more or less, so that's pretty good going.
And that's a pretty sweet deal.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree? Mm-hmm. He helps look after Odin.
Yep. It's not so bad.
Anyway, I think that's quite a smart move on the part of the Duke, saying, okay, you give my daughter all of these deeds and titles and legal, like, binding agreements that she owns this land
Yep.
for herself, and then I'll give you the dowry.
Yeah, I like that.
He's like securing her place before the marriage is settled.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Isn't it weird that could happen and it was her land, but then women couldn't open their own bank accounts till like 70 years ago?
I think it was later than that.
Was it the 50s or the 60s, I think?
Was it?
I think.
I don't know. It's so weird.
Doesn't matter, but anyway. But she could own half of Scotland.
I guess I'm thinking about it with a modern head on, that he wants his daughter to be okay. But he's probably doing it so that he's in control of all of that.
I mean, it's probably a bit of that. A bit of both.
Given the time.
Yeah. And it's... I've always imagined it to be very familial.
Yeah.
So, like, what your family controls is equally as important as what you personally, like, have your name on.
But I'm thinking him as her father and presumably head of the family, he probably considers that as adding to his personal wealth.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing.
Well, I mean, it was of the time.
Yeah.
I would be pretty annoyed if if my dad did that to me.
Yeah. Came in and started, like, building in the garden.
Yeah,
oh, it's for the family.
Where to go. Love you, Dad. I don't think you listen, because I don't think you know how podcasts work.
No, he's still not entirely sure what a podcast is.
But you know, if you've made it this far, we talked about you.
See, we can tell him we talked about him in an episode. Don't tell him which one.
But he doesn't know how it works.
Oh, that's true.
The problem with the Duke of Burgundy's plan is that James didn't have all of this money and land and titles to be giving to his new wife.
He's a schemy bastard.
Well, I don't think... Not for this reason, because that was never part of the original agreement. The original agreement was the tournament and then the dowry. But then this new thing has been presented. The way he goes about getting all of the money and land and titles is schemy. But I don't think he set out...
That's fair.
Like, hiding that he didn't have all of this.
You can just take out his Uno reverse card.
No, basically what he did was he decided to steal it from his nobles across Scotland.
That's got Sonny Bean logic written all over it. Like, ooh.
I'll just steal it, and then all my problems will go away.
I don't have money. I could steal money.
Well, he started with the Livingstons, the clan. They were falsely charged with crimes. They were executed. And because they had betrayed the crown got all of their lands and money.
Dr. Livingston, I presume.
So dodgy.
Yeah.
That he could just take what he wanted. Like, oh, you betrayed me. Gimme.
Criminal. Dibs.
Unfortunately, though, the wealth that James got from the Livingstons wasn't enough to cover what he owed.
Damn, this was a high price.
So that was when James decided to go after the Douglases, who were super wealthy and powerful.
Yep.
Like I said.
But didn't have dogs.
Didn't have dog? What?
They kind of. They were Douglas.
Oh. Kieran, free to a good home. To come pick him up. 1, 2, 3.
You must be sick.
I'm sick of this shit.
Didn't hear it coming.
I know, I didn't. Not even a little. I didn't expect it at all. It's the Sudafed just doing things to me.
I've got you all hyped up on cough syrup.
I know. What if we listen to what we've said so far and it doesn't make sense?
What if we're just like doing Charlie Brown noises?
I know. What if
Charlie Brown parent noises.
What if I've just been gabbling and I've completely butchered the story? If that's happened, please tell us.
Well,
don't just assume that it's part of it. You need to tell us.
Well, we'll just release it as the Butcher of Stirling Castle.
Anyway, King James II has decided to go after the Douglas clan because they have lots of land and lots of power. And he did this in a super brave, kingly manner. He went after the Douglases when the Earl of Douglas was on pilgrimage and wasn't home.
So he's a schemy bastard.
Yeah. James II destroyed Castle Douglas completely. He burned the whole building to the ground. And he took away all of William Douglas's titles and land.
Jesus.
While he wasn't there to defend himself.
Well,
he was the Earl.
Pilgrimage as well.
He was away. So nobody could really do anything because it was all taken while the Earl was away.
Outrageous.
And William was furious about this. Because, he heard about it. I didn't mention this earlier, but William's uncles had been executed at Stirling Castle about 10 years before this happened, also on false charges, but this happened when King James II was still a young boy. So he didn't make the decision, but it happened under his reign still. And William was still bitter about it because they were murdered unlawfully.
Absolutely fair.
So he's still sore at the king, and now this has happened.
Jeez, oh.
That he's stolen all of his land, burned the castle. Not good. Before returning to Scotland from pilgrimage, William had time to think, and what he did was very smart. He got his ducks in a row before he came back.
Very nice.
He pursued legal help from various people, and they were able to get his titles and land back before he even returned to Scotland.
Oh, interesting.
They managed to sort everything out. Because it was illegal.
Yeah.
What James had done.
Don't think that stopped kings, though.
No, not usually, but it did in this case.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it didn't until he was challenged.
Yeah. So unfortunately for James, his big power move had backfired big time.
Yeah.
Because he hadn't gotten what he hoped. He hadn't secured more power. He hadn't secured any more support. If anything, he had turned a whole load of his most powerful nobles against him. Because there were the Douglases themselves, but the Douglases had allies who were the other powerful families. So they supported Douglas before they supported the king. A lot of the nobles in the Highlands in particular supported William Douglas. They didn't like King James because they saw him...
As an arsehole?
Well, yeah, but I read that they kind of saw him as a lowland king, not a Highland king. Because there was the Lord of the Isles and things at this time, where the islands were kind of a kingdom unto themselves. They didn't recognise the king as their king.
Fair.
So King James has stirred up a lot of animosity against him because they've watched him attack the Douglases for his own gain, which kind of justifies the way that they feel about him. Like, this guy, really? He's king?
Him? Fair.
So, what can James do now? How can he get himself out of the hole that he has dug himself?
Douglas himself, yes.
People are going to hate this episode.
Presumably, he's just going to double down. Maybe strip more titles. Maybe burn someone else's castle.
Okay, you think he's going to go in harder?
Yeah. Just keep after him.
Throw in more trains.
Throw in more trains. Say there are more crimes that didn't happen. Generally just cause a ruckus.
Well, he invited William to have dinner with him at Stirling Castle.
Very nice.
In 1452. Apparently on Shrove Tuesday.
Oh.
Which is Pancake Day, which just happened 2 days ago.
It did indeed.
Unfortunately, they didn't pick Shrove Tuesday because of pancakes. Shrove Tuesday is the beginning of Lent, I think, or like the day before Lent, which is when you're supposed to give things up. So he was having a big feast at the castle to celebrate the start of Lent.
Makes sense.
So that was why they picked it. If you're William and you've received this invitation to come have dinner with the king, how are you feeling?
Apprehensive.
What are you thinking?
Maybe it's time to make amends. Maybe he's going to murder me.
Why make amends?
I don't know. You're just hopeful because he wronged you, and you've proved that he wronged you.
Fair.
And he doesn't want a powerful enemy.
Put it in the past.
Yep.
Well, he considered the risk because he wasn't a stupid man.
Yep.
He knew that the king had a lot of power, and he knew that the king was kind of out for him. And he managed to get a letter of safe conduct for the trip. I don't know if you've heard of that before.
No.
Basically, it's a letter from the king ensuring his safety while travelling to the dinner and while at the king's hospitality.
Very nice, very nice.
Ensures that he'll be safe even though he's technically on enemy turf.
Yeah, it's a sort of like a truce.
Yeah, it's something that gets issued during times of war sometimes, so that leaders can get together and they can negotiate terms or peace without the worry that they're going to go at each other.
Oh, that makes sense.
A letter of safe conduct. By all accounts, they had a nice time at the feast. William made it. They all had a good time together. No falling out. I'd imagine it would have been pretty tense, because you can't just erase everything like it didn't happen. But they had dinner together. They broke bread together. The next day is when everything went to shit. They hadn't discussed business of any kind the night before over dinner. They just had a good time. But the following day was when the two men got together. They were alone and they were discussing about how they were going to move forward. Because in order for there to be peace between them, they would have to find some way of moving past what happened.
Yep.
Which makes sense. I think there's a lot to admire in that. During this discussion, King James tried to get William to break the bonds and agreements that he had made with other Highland nobles that he had allied with. They had their own agreements that they were going to look out for each other, protect each other, support each other. As you'd expect, because they don't like the king. So they're all looking out for one another.
Seems fine, yeah.
The king wanted William to ally with him instead, not the Highlanders. But William refused. He would not give up his alliance with the other nobles. He wanted to find some other way of there being peace. But he wouldn't betray his... I don't want to say friends. Friends seems kind of... not the right word.
Yeah. His blood brothers.
You know what I mean? Like they were in it together. He wouldn't give them up. Apparently, King James responded to this saying, "False traitor, since you will not, I shall."
Ew.
And the king basically exploded in a temper at William, and he stabbed him 26 times.
Oh my days, that's a lot.
In the neck and shoulder.
Ugh. Jesus.
A hell of a reaction
That
to
is.
not getting what you want.
To a no, yeah. Oh, God.
Now remember, William had a letter of safe conduct. This is illegal.
Yeah. As someone with a pretty much non-existent temper.
As someone who's been stabbed.
I don't think I've ever lost my temper.
You don't have a temper.
In any way. I don't have any.
You've never had a temper.
Any form of temper at all.
You're very patient.
Yeah, I just can't imagine it. Like I struggle to imagine. Obviously, not many people can imagine losing it to the point of stabbing
that's
someone.
a whole other level of temper.
Yeah, that's just next level.
That's not normal. But no, you don't have a temper.
When I hear people explode in a temper, I'm like, what? Like, why though? I mean, I've never been in such high pressure situations. Maybe a temper would come out.
I guess there was a lot riding on it, but it's still
stabbing someone 26 times in the neck, isn't it?
It's bad conduct on the part of a ruler.
Yeah. But
naturally, someone stepped in to help the king commit the deed, because he's the king, not the man who'd just been stabbed.
I mean, yeah.
You know, as you'd expect, because that's the way it fucking goes.
Yep.
A man called Sir Patrick Grey, who I couldn't find much about other than he was a Scottish noble.
He liked to join in a stabbing when there was one going.
He stepped in to help the king win what I can't even call a fight.
Yeah.
To finish off the attack. He hit William with a poleaxe, which is one of those long, tall axes from medieval times. You've probably seen it. It's like a really long stick with an axe head on the end.
Yeah, I think so.
And this guy, Sir Patrick, basically split William's head open, even though he had already been stabbed all these times.
Mental.
So cruel.
Yeah. Well, that's a bit much.
When the murder had been done and William was dead, they dumped his body out of a window and it landed in the garden below, which is now called the Douglas Garden, which you can visit at the castle today, which we did.
We did.
We visited the Douglas Garden.
We did.
And that is the story of the Douglas Garden.
Ugh.
It was really atmospheric when we were there because that was when the storm was rolling in.
Yeah, it was quite cool.
Remember, we were standing in the garden and we were just watching sheets of rain move in and completely cover the Wallace Monument.
Yeah.
And then they were just moving towards the castle.
Because it wasn't raining on us, but you could see all the rain coming. Mm-hmm. It was very cool.
So yeah, you can visit the Douglas Garden. There's a window, which I think is stained glass. And this is referred to as the Douglas window because this is the window they think he was pushed out of.
Yeah.
But they don't know.
Who knows? After 500 years.
Yeah, it's a long time.
There's not just a body still there, Dave.
Well, the Douglases were absolutely livid that William had been murdered when he was promised safety.
Yeah.
They all had. They had seen the letter. They were outraged.
Yeah, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. And they actually marched on Stirling. They took this as effectively a declaration of war.
Well, it'd be hard not to. I guess. Oh.
And they were super sassy because they pinned safe conduct letters to their horses' tails, mocking the king and highlighting to anyone who saw them just how badly he had betrayed them.
Well, that's next level. Mm-hmm. Can't even.
Isn't it bad?
Yeah.
It leaves a really bad taste in your mouth that someone would do that.
Mental.
Ultimately, though, after months of fighting, James II kept the throne. But the fighting was really brutal during this time. Because it's effectively civil war.
Yeah.
And civil war is always particularly bloody.
Yeah. There's something about it.
From having the shared history and shared home, there's something about it that makes it just particularly bad, which this was. But this might cheer you up. In a strange twist of fate, James II would be blown up by one of his own guns in a later battle.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think it was a cannon and it exploded.
Ooh.
And blew him up.
That is nasty. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily undeserved, but
no,
nasty.
But a nasty way to go. Could be karma.
Could be karma.
It's about bloody time.
Could have been one of his men. Could have been the Douglases.
Ooh.
Cannon
sabotage. A sneak attack.
Yeah.
Cannon sabotage. So that's King James II. King James III also had a bad time of it.
Oh no. Oh no.
He was basically murdered by his own son.
Ooh. That's not a good time.
No. And we talked about it already, I think, but it was his marriage that brought Orkney and Shetland under Scottish rule.
Yep.
We talked about that a couple weeks ago, last week.
Yes, recently.
I think it was last week. And he was obsessed with an alliance with England, which the Scots hated.
Yeah.
And eventually he faced rebellion by his own son, James IV. And James III was killed in battle. And James IV, he felt very guilty about this, that he'd played a part in his dad's death. Apparently he confessed to it in the chapel at Stirling Castle.
Jeez, oh.
He confessed to having a role in his father's death.
Yeah. That's a lot. Patricide's not good. Not good.
No. I think regicide as well, the killing of your king.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's what that is.
Twosies. That's rough.
But a huge portion of the present day Stirling Castle that you can go see was built on the order of King James IV.
Oh, okay.
Which is why I bring him up. Huge, quite a few buildings. And a lot of what you see now, he had built.
Oh.
Basically because he wanted to show off how powerful and cool he was to the kings and queens of Europe.
Yeah.
And he needed a good palace to do that. So he wanted Stirling Castle to be a royal hub and a court worthy of the courts of Europe.
Oh.
That was the goal. He also wanted to show off to his new bride, who was Margaret Tudor. And that is Margaret Tudor of the Tudors. She was the daughter of Henry VII, making her the auntie of the infamous Henry VIII.
Ooh. Was there a Henry the Ninth? Or was he the last Henry? Yeah.
No, he was the last Henry, from what I understand. I think he had a bad rep.
Yeah. Ruined the name for a while.
He was also No, he wasn't the last Tudor. Elizabeth, his daughter, was the last Tudor. James IV had the Great Hall of Stirling Castle built in 1503. And it's an incredible building. It really is. We went to go see it. It's very tall. It has wooden rafters, a really grand ceiling.
I was just about to say very grand.
And the whole thing, the whole outside of the Great Hall is painted a gold colour.
It's very cool.
It's quite a bright yellow, really. And the reason that they've painted it this colour in the present day is because it would have been a similar colour back then, because James wanted everyone to see it. It would be like the Golden Hall. He also had the chapel built, which we went to go see for ourselves.
Did he build it to confess in it?
No, I think he had it like rebuilt.
Oh.
I don't know actually. Maybe not. Anyway, he had it built, the chapel that's there now. And it's really impressive, so much detail on the inside of it.
Yeah.
But it was weird because when we went, you said it's one of the only chapels you've been in that didn't feel peaceful.
Yeah, and I thought it was quite cold and quite bare.
Yeah, you didn't feel very peaceful in there.
No, I didn't vibe. I quite like being inside a churches and chapels and things, but that one didn't do anything for me.
No.
Felt too much like a village hall. Weird.
Not for you.
No.
Not grand enough for Kieran.
Or maybe too grand? Don't know.
One of the other ways that James was trying to show off to the European kings and queens was by filling the castle with lots of artists and musicians.
Very cool.
Because this was the Renaissance period.
That I can get behind.
Of history. So all of these things were very important to show how cultured you were.
I thought it was like the 1700s.
Nope, earlier.
Yeah.
1500s.
Very cool.
The 1700s were, well, in Scotland anyways, the Jacobean era.
Ooh.
Or I suppose this was the Jacobean era, because King James was king.
Don't know.
Anyway, this was the Renaissance.
Yep.
This was it. He had artists, he had musicians, but he even had an alchemist.
Ooh.
Which I knew you'd be interested in.
Yeah. Was he making gold?
I think he was trying to. Having an alchemist at court showed that you were a monarch of learning. You valued science, even though we wouldn't consider it science today.
Yeah. I'd be curious what alchemists did.
I'm going to tell you a little bit.
Oh, well,
if you're interested.
I am interested.
Well, before we get into that, James IV was a bit different to the kings who had come before. Because so far we haven't talked about any of the kings having artists at court and musicians at court and exploring science and culture. Because they didn't have the money.
Oh.
They didn't have the money because they were at war.
It's expensive.
Battles were happening, so James IV was one of the lucky ones who wasn't at war with England.
Yeah.
When he got married, the Treaty of Perpetual Peace was signed between Scotland and England, which didn't last.
I mean, I appreciate the effort.
It was not perpetual.
I like they
but
tried.
Because he had married Margaret Tudor, there was no war between them. So he had more time and money to explore these things, which not many kings had before.
Yeah. A much better use of time than war.
Yeah.
A much better use of money.
Yeah. Absolutely. John Damian, or Giovanni Damiano del Falcucci.
Did you just make up an Italian version of his name?
No, I didn't. He was an Italian alchemist. And he was the alchemist that James IV had at Stirling Castle.
Very nice.
I read that he was referred to as a leech at the time. But apparently this wasn't an insult.
Oh.
This was just a nickname given to someone who was a physician or a doctor.
Oh, because of using
They were
leeches and
called
stuff.
leeches.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I thought it was really mean, but it doesn't seem to have been meant that way.
And I suppose they were used as curing. You know, it didn't work, but...
Now, John was trying to create something called the Fifth Element.
Ooh.
Not the movie.
Nope.
The Fifth Element. And it's difficult to describe. I tried to look into it, but basically, at this time, people thought that the Fifth Element explained how light travels.
Oh, yeah.
And how gravity works. Because they didn't understand these things. But they thought that this fifth element was responsible for them. So they were trying to create the fifth element. Yeah, I also read that he was trying to find a way to turn metal into gold.
Yep.
Which was something a lot of alchemists were doing. So it's basically an early form of research.
Yeah.
into things that they didn't understand.
I like it.
So it's kind of like the Legends of the Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah.
Metal into gold. But what you're going to love, well, because I loved it, John tried to fly. He literally tried to master flight.
Very nice.
In his work as an alchemist, which I just think is stupendous. I think it's absolutely superb.
Yep.
And what was kind of funny to me is that the reason he did it at all was because the king was getting bored of him. Because he got used to all the research he was doing.
Yeah.
He wasn't interested or intrigued anymore.
And research is slow going at the best of times.
So John really had to pull something out of the bag to keep the money rolling in if he was going to keep his job. So his answer to that was flight. So he began creating a pair of wings for himself that were made from birds' feathers.
I mean, the logic stands.
And various other bits and pieces. It sounds an awful lot like Icarus. He's all I can see.
Yep.
And I'm not completely wrong. Because John decided that he was going to use these wings that he was building, his own invention, to fly from Stirling all the way to France.
I appreciate the boldness.
And his reason for this was because James and the royal court were going to be visiting Turkey. So John said, hey, don't even worry about it. I'll fly and I'll meet you in France when you get there, and then we can journey to Turkey together.
Very nice. I like it.
Confidence.
Yep.
Confidence is key.
I thought it was going to be because you went, turkeys, they fly. But then remembered that...
They don't really, do they?
They don't really. I don't know if we have turkeys. It's wild turkeys. It feels more of an American thing.
Yeah. We certainly don't have them now, I don't think.
No. Eat them all, maybe. Don't know.
John put his wings on, and he climbed up onto the battlements of the castle.
Oh, you got to start small.
Now, if you remember, the castle's very high, sheer drops.
Yeah.
The whole court had turned out to watch him.
You would?
Because he was going to fly.
Yep. It's quite the spectacle.
I know.
I would turn up. I love watching the Red Bull thing where people try and make their own flying contraptions.
Oh, it just gives me anxiety.
Yeah.
So he's on the battlements.
Yep.
He takes a deep breath. He has everyone watching him. He has his wings on. And he jumps off. Now, another member of the court at the time was a poet called William Dunbar. And he wasn't paid nearly as much as John Damien was. And he was kind of salty about it. Because he wasn't getting paid enough. He watched Damien take the leap. And he saw what happened afterwards. And William Dunbar was over the moon. He was pleased as punch. And he wrote a poem about it. Which he took great pleasure sharing with the court. And I've got part of it here that's been translated into a more modern English. Because the English it was written in at the time is quite difficult to decipher. So here's how it goes.
Yep.
And this is what happened to John Damien. He cut away his plumage bright and slipped his arms from it outright. And in a bog he did alight, eye deep in mud to slide. The birds then at his plumage struck, as at a monster run amuck, and all his feathers they did pluck, and flung them far and wide. And as he tumbled from the skies, the ravens cawed at his demise, and crows pursued with baleful cries, and other shows beside. If rooks had spied him where he crashed, with claws they surely would have slashed. Instead, among the ducks he splashed, 3 days in filth to hide.
I mean, he was quite lucky by the sounds of it.
He was very lucky. Now, if you couldn't tell, John's jump did not go well. William Dunbar did not... He wasn't taking any prisoners with the poem. He was delighted that John's flight did not happen.
Yeah.
Basically what happened was he jumped off the battlements. And by all rights, he should have died. Because...
It's a long way down.
He just went down. He just completely crashed.
Yeah, well, even, trying to glide, especially if you just have big homemade bird feather wings. It's not going to do anything.
No, he should have fallen to his death, but he was lucky because he crashed into a rubbish heap.
Oh.
A literal cesspit was what I saw. And that broke his fall.
Oh.
He didn't land into the ground, he landed into all this rubbish. And he managed to get away with only a broken thigh bone.
That's pretty good going.
Which I appreciate could have been more deadly in the 1500s.
Yeah, it's still Very damaging.
because it's a broken bone.
But he could have just been crumpled into an accordion.
Exactly. He could have broken every bone in his body.
Yeah.
So I would say just a broken thigh bone is a success when you've jumped off a castle.
In the scheme of things, yeah.
After this, James didn't really want John jumping off anything else, so he kept him well paid for the rest of his life, and he retired on a good pension.
Oh, well, that's quite nice, actually. I assumed he got struck out and cast off.
No, he was well kept for the rest of his days.
Oh, that's nice.
I think on the condition that he didn't jump off the castle again. So that's one of the nicer Stirling Castle stories.
I know, I like that.
He tried to fly. James IV also had the King's Old Building built, as well as the entrance to the castle. The King's Old Building is where the military museum is now.
Oh, cool.
And the big entrance, the big gate that you walk through as you enter the castle, he had that built. But he died before all his plans were finished. He died at the Battle of Flodden.
Which we've talked
And
about.
the kitchens. He had the kitchens built, which we got to go down and see. They were like kind of underground, a bit creepy.
Yeah, very cool.
I felt a bit uneasy in there. I didn't really like it.
I wonder, what did they do before there were kitchens? I guess there were just other kitchens. Or less formal kitchens.
Yeah, maybe.
Don't know. And did he build the King's Building? Or did he call it the King's Old Building? I wonder.
I don't know. I just know that building that is currently called the King's Old Building, he had built.
Very nice.
Now, his son, James V, went on to build one of the big palace buildings at the castle for him and his wife, Mary of Guise. Again, it was showboating. He wanted to show off. But if you go around the castle now, there's a lot of decor that reflects James V and Mary of Guise. We walked through a lot of it. Her presence is stamped on a lot of the castle. Now, do you remember the building that had the square courtyard in the middle of it?
Yes.
This was sort of the palace building that he had built. But I only found out when we went to go visit that there's a story of James V keeping a lion in that courtyard. An actual lion.
Actual lion.
Just hanging out.
Yep. Just chilling out with a lion.
And apparently this was a thing that a lot of kings and queens would do across Europe.
Yeah.
Because it was a sign of prestige.
I mean, no one else had a lion. So it's pretty good going.
And that's what I'm saying. Other kings and queens had lions too.
Oh, but like in your kingdom.
Oh, right. I thought you meant at all. I was like, no.
Direct opposite of what I just said.
And it was particularly important to, the kings of Scotland, queens of Scotland, because the lion rampant is the standard of Scotland.
Yeah.
On the flag. The palace that James V had built is where the Stirling heads were carved and painted on the ceiling. Now, you were really taken with them.
I did. I thoroughly enjoyed them.
You really enjoyed them. It's incredible craftsmanship in a couple of the rooms. There's replicas up there now, but basically what he did was he had the carvings of people he admired. He had them carved into the ceiling in profile, and sometimes not in profile, mostly in profile, and had them painted, and they're incredible.
Yeah, they're really cool, and they're done, and they were painted on the ceiling, so that when you're looking from the ground, they look
more real.
And they look really 3D when they're only a little bit 3D. The like angles and stuff of them are done really well.
They're really
clever.
impressive, really impressive. And yeah, it's replicas that are painted on the ceiling now, but they've still got some of the originals from this time. Yeah, it was awesome. But that's the palace that James V had built, just to give you a better idea. Now, James V died 6 days after the birth of his daughter, Mary, Queen of Scots, who we've talked about.
Yep.
When he died, Mary of Guise was in charge of Stirling Castle, which is why so much of the decor and the carvings and the art reflect her and her family. And her daughter Mary, who would go on to be Queen of Scots, she was crowned at Stirling in 1543, which was a very big deal.
Very cool.
Much later, during Mary's reign, when she came back to Scotland from France, the chapel that's at Stirling Castle was the only chapel in Scotland that still performed Catholic services. All the others had kind of gone underground during this time.
Yep.
If you remember, Mary was a Catholic, but Scotland had adopted Protestantism, and a lot of people disapproved of her faith. But the chapel at Stirling was still a Catholic chapel.
That's quite cool. The best defended one. Come on, try stop us.
Well, I read, because I got the guidebook from the castle, because I'm a nerd. I read in the guidebook that during one of the services at the chapel, the priests who were giving the sermon were attacked.
Oh, wow.
As, what's the word? Like protesting the Catholic faith. And they were left with broken heads and bloody ears.
Ooh.
And one of the people who carried out the attack was Mary's half-brother.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
So that happened at Stirling Castle.
Crazy.
That's how mad people were.
It doesn't have the ornamentation you'd expect of a Catholic church.
I don't know. I feel like a lot of it would have been taken away.
Oh, that's a very good point, actually, yeah.
When she had to give up the throne.
That would make more sense.
I think. Makes sense in my head. When her son, James VI, was born...
Oh, here we go again. Here we go.
I don't like this bit. I can't stand him. When he was born, Mary went all out to celebrate his birth and his baptism, which was a Catholic baptism. I feel like she was making a point here to have it a big deal and to have him baptised as a Catholic. Definitely, like...
It's pointed, isn't it?
Yeah. But she held the very, very first fireworks display to ever happen in Scotland.
Very cool.
At Stirling Castle.
I think you told me that while we were there or we read it on something.
How cool is that?
So cool.
Firework display for the very first time.
I wonder what it was like. You know,
it must have been unbelievable.
Can't even imagine.
No. Seeing that for the first time.
Seeing something like that.
Especially to see that for the first time as an adult.
Yeah. That'd be crazy.
One of the other things that Mary had done for James's baptism was have a huge mock castle built just outside Stirling Castle. So it wasn't the size of a proper castle, but it was big. And they staged huge dances and games, performances, feasts. It was a huge celebration. And this was in 1566.
Very cool.
It was a huge party. Now what's interesting is that later in James VI's life, Guy Fawkes would try to assassinate him.
Oh yeah.
Using gunpowder. And now that's commemorated with fireworks.
Yeah.
And fireworks were used for the first time in Scotland to celebrate the birth of James VI.
That's quite funny, isn't it?
Yeah. Everything tied up in loops and
all comes around.
Unfortunately, we know that Mary's story isn't really a happy one.
No.
If you don't know, we have a great episode on Mary Queen of Scots. Would highly recommend it. Listen.
Season 2. It's a beast.
It was a labour of love.
It's amazing.
She eventually had to give up her throne to James VI. And they were separated when he was still a baby. He never saw his mother again. And he was kept at Stirling Castle, surrounded and raised by his regents rather than his parents. Because his dad was dead. Mary was accused of murdering him. Seriously, if you haven't listened to the episode,
it's a doozy.
It's wild. James and all of those that supported him and Protestantism gathered in Stirling. Stirling Castle was their hub. Mary supporters gathered in Edinburgh, even though I don't think she was there then. She was imprisoned in lots of different places and kind of moved around. But all her supporters were in Edinburgh. And an attack was staged on Stirling Castle by Mary's supporters in 1571. But they didn't manage to take it. And James was safe.
I wonder what she would have done. Just snatched her son back, I guess.
Well, she wasn't there.
Yeah.
You just have to hope that because they support you, they won't hurt your son.
Yeah, it's so weird. But then to have a son she's, not that she's never met, that she hasn't seen since he was a baby.
But then maybe they would try to take James and then have him raised by them instead.
Yeah. Crazy for him, never meeting his mum.
Yeah, he grew up without her. And he even kind of turned against her as he got older. He seemed to support Elizabeth more.
Oh, he doesn't know her. Strange.
Yeah. Back to the castle, though. Stirling Castle kind of became James VI's world. Because that was his home. That was everything he knew. And by 1583, the castle wasn't in a good way. There were several of the buildings that were close to collapse because it hadn't been cared for.
Yep.
Now, when James VI's blushing bride, Anne of Denmark, wanted to give birth to their son at Stirling Castle, she basically demanded that James sort it out.
Sort it out?
Yeah, because she didn't want to give birth to their child in a hovel. He had to get his shit together. So he did.
Fair. As many wives demand of their husband.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Get your shit together.
He built the Chapel Royal in 1593, 1594, so that there was somewhere suitable for his son to be baptised, so not Catholic anymore.
Yep.
So I feel like this is when the change happened.
Yeah.
That the chapel, as Mary knew it, was replaced with the one that's there currently.
That makes sense.
I think. Mm-hmm. But it's all very confusing. I might have that wrong. Prince Henry was born, but building an entirely new chapel wasn't the grandest thing that James did for his son's birth. And this is one of my favourite stories about the castle, which we've talked about. In 1594, Henry was baptised and there was a huge celebration, a huge feast. Do you remember the Great Hall that I talked about earlier? You already know what I'm talking about. There was a huge feast in this Great Hall, and a fish course made up part of this meal. And the fish course was served in a giant wooden ship.
So cool. So cool.
An actual ship. The mast of this ship that the fish was served in was 40 feet high.
Unbelievable.
And when I tried to find a comparison to give you some context, apparently a brachiosaurus was about 43 feet tall. But I realised that doesn't really help. But I wanted to include it anyway.
That's amazing.
A double-decker bus is 27.5 feet.
Yeah, it's got like 3 stories.
If that helps.
Yeah.
Because having comparisons helps me imagine heights.
I can just picture a brachiosaurus now.
I thought it was funny.
Yeah, I like that. Oh, if you need some help, this is how big a brachiosaurus is.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Exactly. Now you can definitely imagine what I'm talking about.
Now I can picture this brachiosaurus eating a ship.
But yeah, a double-decker bus is nearly 30 feet.
Yeah.
And this mast was 40 feet.
Wild.
Very, very big. And this ship also had functioning cannons. And all they used it for was to serve fish.
Yeah, I feel they could have done replica cannons or something.
It's so extra.
It is.
I cannot imagine having that much money and power.
I know.
But I guess it was a big deal because he was the king's son.
Yeah.
And having a son was far more important than having a daughter.
Absolutely.
So it was a big deal.
Because you try and marry your daughter off and then end up getting murdered.
He was a showboater, James VI. He liked attention and he liked showing off. And this is very representative of that. Unfortunately though, this was pretty much when Stirling Castle stopped being a royal residence. Because King James VI became King James I of England. He moved to London and he never came back. He basically left Scotland and didn't really bother anymore.
Yep, that was him up to the big leagues.
Yeah, so
what an arsehole.
Stirling Castle wasn't the home of kings and queens anymore.
It's almost a shame.
Isn't it? After all that time. 700 years nearly.
Yeah.
Flash forward to 1745. So we're like another 100 years. And we're in the midst of the Jacobite Rising. Bonnie Prince Charlie laid siege to Stirling Castle in 1746. But the siege was unsuccessful. The castle was far too well armed and the Jacobites didn't really make a dent.
Once again, had defences.
Yeah. They didn't really manage anything. And this was when the castle became more of a military base than a royal palace. This was when the shift happened. And there was a military presence at Stirling Castle up until the 1960s.
Yeah, we read that while we were there, and I thought that was crazy.
Isn't it? Incredible.
One of the battalions lived.
They were there a long time.
Because aforementioned Great Palace, where the ship was the barracks. Mm-hmm. That's just where it was just lined with like bunk beds and things. I'm like, oh, what?
It's very difficult to reconcile the two.
Yeah, it's very bizarre.
Unfortunately, the military prioritise practicality over decor and design, which makes complete sense.
It's fair.
Like they're just doing their job.
Yeah.
But this meant that some of the finer elements of Stirling Castle were lost over time because they just needed a military base.
Yep.
It's not that they weren't interested in preserving history, but that's not their job. It's not
No.
what they were there for. So when the Stirling heads started falling down, the carvings that we spoke about, when they started falling down and breaking, they just took them all down.
Yeah.
So that they didn't hurt anybody. They weren't bothered with preserving them. Which you can't blame them for.
No, like, it seems a shame, but it's not their responsibility.
No.
They have
enough to do.
Well, they have plenty of other quite monumental responsibilities to be dealing with.
In 1820, so we're jumping forward 80 years-ish,
Yep.
the execution of John Baird and Andrew Hardy happened at Stirling after they rebelled against poor working conditions and the lack of care given to loom workers. It's a really interesting story. It's one that we could get into in a mini episode.
Sounds good.
Because it was a huge rebellion. It was an uprising. They had a huge amount of support from the people of Stirling for what they were doing. And when they were executed, they were cheered by the crowd.
Geez, oh.
And they were quite well loved.
Yeah, they're fighting for the people.
Yeah, they're important figures in the history of workers' rights.
That would be interesting.
They were held prisoner at Stirling Castle, and then they were executed on Broad Street, which is just outside the castle. You know, the kind of windy,
Yeah.
the one on the hill. That's where they were executed. And they were both executed by a medical student rather than a professional executioner,
Oh, no.
which is a weird thing to think about.
That is.
And they were beheaded, which seems strange to me because it's 1820.
Yeah. Wasn't that saved for royalty?
Usually,
That's weird.
yeah, they were beheaded rather than hanged.
Maybe they didn't have a gibbet.
Maybe, I'm not sure. Well, the gibbet is for after, I think.
Maybe they didn't
The
have
scaffold is what you hang someone from. The gibbet is what you like display a body on to kind of show off that we did this. Don't do it.
And what are giblets?
Feel we're getting off track. This is already a long episode, I feel like. Now we've reached 1906.
Okay.
So we're getting into more recent
Yep.
history. King Edward is on the throne. And he had visited the castle. And upon visiting the castle, basically demanded that the care of the castle be taken from the military and given to the Office of Works, which was basically an early version of Historic Scotland, who are the people who have it now. And their focus was on taking care of the building and maintaining the history.
Take care of it, jeez.
Yeah, he basically saw the state it was in and was like, nope, we need to look after this castle a bit better, guys. This is not good.
Maybe he just listened to an awesome, sick podcast about it and was like, I want to go and see this castle for myself.
King Edward in 1906.
Yeah.
Listened to a podcast.
Yeah,
I went and visited Stirling
Yeah, because
Castle.
he was on the gondola of time.
Will you stop bringing up the We can't talk about it.
Okay.
You weren't even there on this thing that doesn't exist. Anyway, the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders were the regiment that were most associated with the castle. And they've had different names over time because different regiments were brought together and amalgamated and changed. But I think now they're known as the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders.
I believe so.
And we visited the military museum at Stirling.
It was really interesting. It was really good.
It was really, really interesting. Really enjoyed it. And there's a real sense of pride for the people who have served with them for what the regiment has done over time.
Yeah.
It's quite incredible. They have so many artifacts and things from over the years.
Yeah, well worth a look if you're going to go visit the castle.
Now that's the rough history of Stirling Castle. Not easy to cover 1,000 years.
No, good job though.
But this is the rough history.
I like it.
But now we get to the spooky bit.
Let's get to the spooking.
Because this is generally spooky, not generally history.
It's not the generally history. Generally history.
And I have some good spooky bits for you this week.
Oh yeah? Let me get settled. Ow.
You should keep that in. It usually gets edited out, but you should keep that in. Because this has been a silly episode. I have several ghost stories from the castle. But I've kind of separated it into history and spook because I find it's easier to understand the spook when you know the history.
Well, you can't really have one without the other.
Yeah. So I hope you don't mind I've saved the spooky bit for last.
Unless you're dealing with ghosts from the future, which is
That's a weird thought, isn't it?
That's a separate category.
You should write a movie about that.
Future ghost future.
We can workshop the title. The first story I have for you is kind of a no-brainer. But a lot of people think that the ghost of William Douglas
I wondered if it was,
is said to haunt the Douglas Gardens.
He was the most betrayed, I think, of everybody you mentioned.
It seems a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Now, I know that you're a ham sandwich.
This is true. I have the t-shirt to prove it. You can get one too at generallyspooky.com.
Such a shameless plug. Oh my God.
Seamless.
But he does have a t-shirt that says ham sandwich on it, and you can buy one for yourself if you are also a ham sandwich.
Or your partner is.
True, yeah. Just tell them you're a ham sandwich and I love you.
And I'm like, oh, I'd love a ham sandwich. No, you're not listening.
You had a ham sandwich for lunch today.
I did. Am I a cannibal?
Oh
no.
Oh, interesting. Anyway, I know you're a ham sandwich.
Yep.
But to me, it makes sense that if someone was murdered and then supposedly buried in a shallow grave, they would haunt that spot. Does that make sense?
I think that makes sense. He didn't mention a shallow grave.
I know, I saved it for this bit.
Ooh.
The legend is that he was buried in a shallow, unmarked grave in the gardens.
Ooh.
And the legend continues, suggesting that William rises from the grave as a ghost and roams the gardens, demanding revenge upon King James II.
That would be terrifying.
Wouldn't it? A very bloody spectre.
Oh, yeah.
Stabbed that much.
Stabbed up in his neck and shoulder.
Now, we did go to the Douglas Gardens and we had a wander round.
Yep.
And it was very atmospheric. I think I mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, with all the rain.
I can't say that I felt very tortured or angry when I was there.
Nope.
Because it was quite peaceful, but it was quite creepy.
I was just cold and wet.
I took a few photos of what's deemed the Douglas window, which is the stained glass window over like an archway that William was supposedly thrown out of. And I didn't see anything strange in them, like no ghostly faces or anything. But I did get a hell of a fright when I was looking back through the photos on the camera.
Oh, yeah.
Because the rain was coming in. I took a photo, and then when I was looking at the little screen on the camera, there's a dry patch on one of the walls where the rain hadn't hit yet. And it looks a bit like a strange, like, pale mist. And my heart stopped when I saw it. I was like, what on earth is that? But then when I zoomed in, it's just dry wall.
And
the rest is wet wall.
And you showed me, I was like, I can't see anything.
I know. I felt so
like
stupid.
on the wall, like what's on the wall?
What is it? But then, to be fair, I only showed you when I'd figured out what it was and explained. Guess what I just thought? But I think it would be pretty scary to run into him if he is a ghost.
Yep.
Because by the sounds of things, he's very angry, very vengeful.
Maybe he's the Bloody Baron in Harry Potter.
Maybe. It makes for a good ghost story, doesn't it? The vengeful ghost.
Yeah.
Unmarked graves and all that.
Casper the Vengeful Ghost. That'd be very different.
Casper isn't vengeful. Casper's nice. On top of Mr. Douglas, Stirling Castle has a whole host of lady ghosts. It's a common ghost trope. We've talked about lady ghosts before. We had an episode about the Black Lady of Lark Hall.
Yep.
Way back in season 1.
It's a good one.
It's one of my favourites, if not my favourite. And Stirling is similar but different because Stirling has several ghost ladies. Firstly, there's Stirling's Black Lady, who I couldn't find much about other than she exists. She's been seen and felt on the back walk of the castle, which I think is part of the castle that was built in the 1800s when the military were there. But I could have that wrong.
I think we went to go to that bit and the guy was like, it's way too stormy, you can't go over that way.
Oh yeah, it was too windy.
I'm like, oh,
no,
okay.
it's closed.
Don't want to get blown off the castle.
But I might have that wrong. The only information I could find about her is that she creates a feeling of dread, fear, and foreboding in the people who encounter her.
It's very, very dark.
What I will say is that the visuals of this spectre are terrifying. Like a black ghost who's wandering around the outside of the castle. It's like shadowy figure who gives you this feeling of just fear and dread.
Kind of a lot.
like wandering around the castle at night and then just meeting her standing there. You know, like the woman in black?
Yeah.
Like, that's scary.
Yeah.
So the visuals of that are terrifying, but I couldn't find out much information about her. Thankfully, though, I have other stories. There's also the Pink Lady.
Ooh, do we have a full rainbow of ladies?
Kinda, yeah. The Pink Lady. She's been seen at the castle, and there's a few different theories and legends about her as to who she might be, and she's been seen by a lot of people. A lot of people have talked about the Pink Lady. She's seen in lots of different places, like I said, the kirkyards around the castle, the cemeteries, and Lady's Rock is one of the places she's seen, which we visited without realising we visited it.
Oh, yeah.
Now, do you remember the cemetery that's beside Stirling Castle?
Yes.
This is Old Town Cemetery. And in the cemetery, there's a high rock with a bench on top.
Yep.
That's Lady's Rock.
Oh, okay, okay.
And ye back when, it was a place for the women of the court to safely observe events.
Oh, yes, yep. I read that on one of the placards.
Because they're delicate creatures. So we visited it without even really knowing. And we could do a whole episode on Old Town Cemetery. It's so interesting. The Pink Lady has been seen there. And the people who've met her at the cemetery say that they're filled with feelings of longing, sadness, even unrequited love, some of them. Very tragic.
I feel that a lot. From the dog.
What?
He hates me.
He does not hate you.
He hates me.
He just likes me more. It was funny earlier. He was trying to sit on the couch with me without actually sitting on the couch with me. So he just hikes up one leg and sat on the couch with one butt cheek.
It's quite impressive, really.
And just stood with the rest of his legs. Like, I'm not really sitting here.
But I am. Up. You can kind of get up onto it backwards somehow.
He's been very clingy. I think he knows I'm not well. He's been very sweet.
But we can't tell. We can barely hear.
I'm trying very hard to keep it.
Anything I've just talked about Stirling Castle.
Well, I hope I don't sound like that. I've been trying very hard. I've had my whole coffee and some juice and everything. Anyway, tangent. One story about the Pink Lady suggests that she was the only person to survive the attack of Edward I on Stirling Castle in 1304. And we talked about that. That was when Edward brought Warwolf to the battle and wouldn't let the Scots surrender.
Yep.
The story says that she's trapped at Stirling Castle and the cemetery, forever searching for her lover who was killed in the siege.
Oh.
Now, one thing I thought was interesting was that, according to the stories, she's only ever seen leaving the castle and going to the cemetery. But she's never seen entering the castle.
That's interesting.
So it's like she's taking the same route over and over again.
Yeah.
But you never see her returning. You only see her leaving.
That is interesting. I just remembered one of the placards I read that was when the castle was under siege during the Wars of Independence, and it was held for 3 months, and it was held by 12 monks and 4 women.
Wow.
And that was it. And they managed, I think, a stable boy, and they managed to defend against the English for 3 months.
That's a long time.
It was a long time. It was very impressive.
Jeez, oh. You should have told me that when I was doing my research.
Well, I pointed out at the time, and you're like, ooh, I'll include that. So I haven't mentioned it until now, in case you were going to bring it up.
I mean, yes.
So I did.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
A different theory says that the Pink Lady is actually Mary, Queen of Scots.
Oh.
She stayed at Stirling Castle for a time, but lots and lots of different castles and houses and things claim that Mary is haunting them.
I mean, it's good for business.
It's a very common ghost story that Mary, Queen of Scots is haunting, Linlithgow Palace, or what's the other one?
There's the one where she was in prison on the Loch Leven.
Anyway, there's loads and loads, including the one where she was executed, which is the one that
seems the most
I would
likely.
believe. Lastly, the Pink Lady is supposedly the ghost of a woman called Mary Witherspoon. And she had the unfortunate fate of being targeted by body snatchers.
Ooh, that's nasty.
It's like Burke and Hare all over again. Except not, because they're not body snatchers. Mary Witherspoon was buried in Old Town Cemetery, but she was stolen by a Mr. Mitchell and a James McNabb, which I think is hysterical, because he's a body snatcher called McNabb. And you cannot convince me that's not funny.
Yeah.
And Robert Forrest in 1823. Now, her body was never recovered and it was never returned, but there was never enough evidence to prosecute the men for what they had done. So she was never avenged and her body was stolen and presumably used for science.
Yeah.
In fact, it went so the other way compared to prosecution that Robert Forrest was made the Inspector General of Hospitals for Scotland.
Whoa, that's a bit of a turn, isn't it? Actually, you're so innocent. We're going to give you this very important job for the inconvenience. That's weird.
How bad is that?
That is really bad.
So some people think that the Pink Lady is Mary because her body was stolen and she can't rest anymore. And people have reported smelling rose blossom, if they meet the Pink Lady in the cemetery. And none of the stories about her make her seem particularly threatening. There just seems to be a lingering sadness in all of the stories about her. So that's the Pink Lady.
That's the Pink Lady.
The last lady of Stirling Castle is the most famous.
Green.
Yeah.
Yay.
The Green Lady. The Green Lady of Stirling Castle. She's so famous that Stirling Distillery named a gin liqueur after her.
That's pretty cool.
It sounds so good. It's bramble and mint.
Ooh.
I really want to try it.
That sounds very nice.
It sounds really nice.
If they'd done like Black Lady gin, it'd have to be licorice.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I don't like licorice at all.
Pink gin's too generic now, isn't it?
Lots of people have pink gin, don't they? Now, the Green Lady is a bit different to the other ladies that I've told you about because she's been seen by a lot of people.
Okay.
There's loads of stories about people meeting the Green Lady and seeing the Green Lady.
Now, so is she a green dress? Does she look like a frog? Green skin? Maybe a green hat? What green? Is she sick?
No, I'm sick. I'm the Green Lady. No, I think my understanding of, because green ladies and pink ladies and blue ladies appear everywhere there's a haunting, basically. And I think it's just like the aura they have about them. Like they are that colour.
Interesting.
As a ghost.
Interesting.
Well, like...
Yeah, I get what you mean.
I imagine it kind of like a ghostly green all over, transparent, with just a kind of green look.
I get Swamp Monster from Scooby-Doo.
No, not that. Just like kind of glowing green. But like a pale green. A ghostly green. Not neon green.
It's okay, I'm sure all the listeners will know.
Yes, educate Kieran for me, because I can't convince him. He's looking at me like I'm crazy.
And they'll be telling their ham sandwich husbands and they're going like, what do you mean green? Like what?
Well, along with all of the people who claim to have seen the Green Lady, there's a really interesting story associated with her, which actually has some historical proof.
Oh my god, that never happens.
Are you intrigued?
I am intrigued.
Well, here's the story.
Green me up.
Let me clue you in. We are all the way back in 1561. And Mary, Queen of Scots, has returned to Scotland from France.
Yay.
In September of that year, September 1561, Mary visited Stirling Castle. And this is true. There are historical records that prove she was at the castle in September of that year. Now, this was an important visit because Stirling Castle had kept her safe as a baby when Henry VIII was doing his rough wooing and trying to force her marriage to his son.
Yep.
She was defended at Stirling Castle. So she was very grateful to them for looking after her when she was an infant. So she was returning to the castle, and this was her chance to show her gratitude for what they had done. However, as the Queen entered the castle, one of her serving girls was overcome with a terrible fear. According to the legend, the serving girl was from the Highlands, so she was excellent, but she was also very superstitious. And she became convinced, she worked herself up into a right lather, that if Queen Mary stayed at Stirling Castle, something terrible would happen to her that night.
Ooh.
Now, Mary had a reputation for being kind to her staff, and to her servants. She wasn't a tyrant. So she listened to what the serving girl had to say, because she could see she was very worried. But there wasn't really much that Mary could do about it. If she left Stirling Castle now, they would definitely take offence.
Yeah.
Because being visited by the Queen was a big deal, and she had to thank them for what they had done. But equally, Mary could see how upset the girl was, that she was obviously genuinely worried that something would happen. So she tried to reach a compromise. Mary listened to the girl, she empathised with her, and she said that although she wasn't going to change her plans, she was going to stay, she would allow the serving girl to stay in her bedchamber that night and allow her to personally guard her from harm.
It's very nice of her.
In the hope that that would calm her down. You know, if she's the one who gets to watch over her, she can stop anything from happening.
Yep.
So that seemed to quiet her fears. She seemed pleased with this. And everything went to plan. They had a really pleasant evening, all fine. Eventually it was time to sleep. The Queen and her servant retired to her room, and they kept a candle lit so that the serving girl could spot any threat that came for the Queen.
Very nice.
She could watch her as she slept. Mary fell asleep. The girl took up her post on a chair watching the bed. Now it got later and later, and it's very quiet, it's getting dark. The room was very warm and very comfortable, and before long, the serving girl fell asleep. She began to come around and wake up when her throat was burning. She could feel her throat was just in pieces. She started coughing. She felt like she couldn't breathe. And when she opened her eyes, she could barely see. Because the room was full of smoke. The bed curtains that surrounded the Queen were completely ablaze. Totally on fire. The serving girl had fallen asleep, and she had knocked over the lit candle, causing the curtains to catch fire. She was the threat that she had been scared of.
Oh no.
And she shouted for help, she sprang up out of the chair, but she couldn't get to the Queen through all the flames, and Mary wasn't waking up. She was shouting for her, but she wasn't responding. As the situation became more desperate, the girl knew the Queen had to get out of that bed because the whole thing was on fire.
Yep.
So she was very brave, and she dove in through the fire to pull the Queen out of the bed herself. Luckily, the soldiers who were stationed outside the room heard all of the commotion and the screaming, and they burst their way in. But by the time they did this, the room was almost completely on fire. The soldiers managed to drag the Queen and the girl out into the hall and got the fire under control. Thankfully.
Very nice, very nice.
Unfortunately, although Queen Mary survived the fire, the serving girl didn't. She was terribly burned, terribly injured, but she had managed what she had hoped for. She had saved the Queen's life, but she had paid for it with her own. So now, the story is that she's the one who continues to haunt Stirling Castle after dying in the fire. She's the Green Lady. But she's described as being very bitter and incredibly sad. But even worse, she brings misfortune and doom to anyone that meets her.
Well, I can see why.
Now, when I listened to David's podcast episodes, David Kinnaird of Stirling Ghost Walk, he actually said she's sometimes thought of as a Cassandra, or harbinger of doom. Now, have you heard of Cassandra from Greek mythology?
I don't think so.
She's an interesting figure. She's a sad figure. She was cursed by Apollo, I think. She was cursed with being able to see the future. But nobody believes anything she says. So she's cursed with being able to see what's going to happen and have nobody believe her.
Interesting.
So the legend is that the Green Lady is a Cassandra figure, that she appears before disaster hits the castle.
Oh, yeah, yep, nice.
But she can't tell anyone what's going to happen.
That's a shame.
Now, we know that there really was a fire in Queen Mary's bedroom when she stayed at Stirling Castle. That's completely true, and it's written about, and she survived the fire of her bed curtains. But the serving girl isn't recorded in the same way. We don't have written proof that she existed.
Probably wouldn't be, though, would there, even if she did exist?
You know, you never know. But there really was a fire, and Queen Mary really was involved.
Interesting.
The second version of the Green Lady's identity is just as tragic as Queen Mary's serving girl. And it involves a part of the castle we haven't talked about yet, which is called Elphinston Tower. Elphinston. Now, we didn't go down to Elphinston Tower. I think it's past the cafe.
Okay.
To the right of the main gate that you walk through to get into the main part of the castle.
Oh, yeah.
But it isn't a tower anymore. Only the bottom of it's left. But it used to be a tower. But it's not there now.
She's a chode.
Kieran, it is too late for this. We've been working so hard to get this recorded. I don't know how long you've been listening to this, but we've been recording a lot longer. The legend goes that a daughter of one of the commanders of the castle fell in love with one of the soldiers who was stationed there. Her father found out, and he was absolutely furious. He wouldn't allow it. This pairing was completely unacceptable. So he responded by shooting the soldier.
Well, that's a bit extreme.
Yeah.
But it's not the most extreme thing we've heard at Stirling Castle. So.
He shot him for daring to fall in love with his daughter.
I know, eh?
Which is totally chill.
I know. It's just casual, isn't it?
Man,
glad that didn't happen to me.
The woman was so heartbroken, not only that her lover was gone, but her dad had murdered him in cold blood. She was so heartbroken that the story goes, she was so heartbroken that she threw herself off Elphinston Tower, landing on all of the rocks, the sheer face below, and she died. And some people think that she's the Green Lady, haunting the castle and trying to be reunited with her love that was shot. Now, regardless of her identity, there are lots of stories about the Green Lady, and lots of people talk about having seen her. A woman called Laurie, who worked at the castle in 2017, wrote, I think it's on Stirling Castle's website, but I'll have links in show notes and things where you can read these interviews for yourself. But she said, when I heard the tale from a colleague, I didn't think I'd ever run into her. But one day I descended the stone steps towards the room at the base of the prince's tower. Now, we visited there. That's where the prince had like lessons. And then there's the walk with the gargoyles. Do you remember?
Yes.
So the room at the base of that tower, where her colleague said the Green Lady resides. The door handle mysteriously turned by itself. A few months later, I returned to find some of our uniform rails had tipped over. When I went to investigate, the windows began to rattle, which did make me wonder if I had overstayed my welcome in the Green Lady's domain.
Ooh, that'd be spooky.
Oh, I would pee my pants.
Yeah, you would.
I would absolutely pee my pants. And I'm kind of glad that I didn't have all of the locations for these when we went, because I think I would have been far more scared.
You would have spooked yourself as we went round.
I knew some of the stories, but I didn't know the places.
And I would have been there with the windows rattling going, whew, windy, and then left again.
Well, see, part of me kind of wishes that I had known ahead of time, but I think I have a more honest opinion of the castle, having not looked into specific spots.
Because you get impressioned by them, don't you?
Whereas we had a wander and we kind of took it for what we saw, which I think has value.
Yeah, I think it's okay. More at face value.
Yeah. Another Green Lady story comes from what used to be the officers' mess, which we also saw in the military museum. It's upstairs. And it's a very formal and fancy room. It's where the officers used to have their meals. And I remember reading at the time that they used to pride themselves on the officers' mess because it was so nice. And they made a point of making sure it was very hospitable and welcoming.
It was pretty nice when we had a look at it.
Which I think is nice.
Yeah, I like that.
But I still think it's weird that the officers are treated almost like aristocrats because it's very fancy in there. When the lower ranking soldiers just kind of have to muck in.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of the time the officers were aristocrats and things.
I guess,
weren't they?
yeah. Like, depending on how far you go back.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's nuance and things I don't understand when it comes to military rank. Because I know it's a big deal.
And it's just the hierarchy, isn't it? Like, you have to... You earn your position.
But it's weird to me that they're treated like nobles.
Yeah.
It's strange to me. Anyway... The chef was making dinner for the officers when he was completely overcome with this really uneasy feeling that he was being watched in the kitchen, which I hate. I get that sometimes and I really hate it. He turned round to see who had come into the kitchen, who was watching him just cook dinner, and he saw a translucent green figure standing right behind him.
That would spook you out, wouldn't it?
Now, as you'd expect, having seen something like that, he fainted.
Yeah, fair.
Which is why dinner for the officers was late. And when he was found, they were worried about him, obviously. He'd fallen in the kitchen. That's never good. All he could talk about was the Green Lady. But no one could find anyone at the castle who fit that description. There was no woman there who could have been the person he saw.
Crazy.
She had just vanished. And he was quite rattled, from what I understand.
And everyone went, have you been drinking? No.
Was this brandy full this morning? So those are the ladies that seem to be in residence at Stirling.
The ladies of the castle.
Very creepy. I think it was on David's website for the Ghost Walk that he wrote a really creepy description of them that was really good.
Oh, yeah.
He talked about if you're visiting the castle and out of the corner of your eye see the turn of a heel or the ruffle of a dress around the corner, you should keep your eyes low and leave because your soul might hang in the balance.
Ooh. Spooky.
Because they quite often talk about running into the Green Lady and then meeting your death or some kind of doom.
Your doom.
So not to look her in the eye.
Nope.
Now, as well as the ghost of the ladies, there's also been lots of reports of soldiers haunting the castle.
That makes sense.
And soldiers from different time periods too. And this doesn't surprise me too much.
No.
I think even if you didn't believe in ghosts, I could imagine just everything being so routine and happening over and over again. Something might just linger where it just continues happening.
Yeah.
Like patrols keep on. Something gets stamped into the building.
And when there's so much horrors that happen there, amongst the many sieges, lots and lots of battles.
I would believe it.
Yeah.
In one of his episodes, David made the good point that the reason for all these sightings might be that people expect to see the ghost of a soldier at the castle.
Well, it is the most fitting.
So that's what you see or what you think you see. And he sometimes helps groups who go on ghost hunts and ghost investigations. I think he goes around with the groups and gives like context and historical guidance. Anyway, there's a couple of soldier stories I want to tell you. As far back as the 1820s, the soldiers who were stationed at Stirling Castle spoke about hearing strange noises and seeing strange things when they patrolled the battlements. Now, this is them talking in 1820s about seeing strange stuff. And in some stories, these soldiers would put the noises and the things that they were seeing down to the Green Lady. So they would blame the Green Lady for all this in the 1820s.
That's funny.
It's a crossover. One legend talks about a soldier who was on sentry duty around this time, and he was patrolling his beat, and he came across an awful sight. He discovered the body of a fellow soldier lying on his back on the ground with his face contorted with horror. Now, nobody knew what happened to him. He had no outward injuries, but there was no doubt that he was dead.
Jeez, huh?
Now, in the decades that followed, the battlements that they had been patrolling were dismantled. They weren't in use anymore. They didn't exist. But in the room below where the battlements used to be, soldiers reported hearing disembodied marching from up above where the battlements used to be.
Ew.
But they weren't there anymore. So there couldn't have been anyone marching above them.
That's pretty weird.
So it was as if the sentry was carrying on with his march.
Still on duty.
Now, this happened 3 times from what I saw. The first was in 1946. They were hearing this marching. And then again in the 50s. And the footsteps were heard by officers on the later occasions, which I think gives them more weight.
I think so.
Because if an officer starts talking about stuff like that, his reputation's on the line.
Well, they've got more to risk by admitting to superstition, don't they? What I find weird about that means, if it's true, that not only is there a ghost, but he's walking on ghost wood.
Mm-hmm. Something that doesn't exist.
Yeah, to make the sound. And then he's walking on something ghostly that's making a sound.
Isn't that strange?
That's very strange.
You'd creep me out, just hearing marching somewhere you know people can't be.
Yeah. Well, imagine standing underneath that and just hearing it from above you and just looking up like, that's just sky up there. Mm-hmm. Very spooky.
So yes, that was one of the spookier ones. One of the stories that David told in one of his podcast episodes, I think concerns this ghost, but it's also pretty funny. I think you're going to like it. In the 90s, there was a TV show in the US called Sightings, and they focused on all things supernatural.
Yep.
UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts, the works. They did
sight.
everything. Yes. They did everything. And they visited Stirling Castle.
Yeah, nice.
And I think they spoke to David, and they also spoke to, I think he was the warden of the castle at the time. It was a man that David knew called Chick. And they were speaking to them about the ghost stories and the history of the castle. And the Sightings TV team brought a medium with them, who was also from the US. And she had lots to say.
Undoubtedly so.
Now, David told it amazingly in the episode. I highly recommend going on Patreon and listening to it yourself. But I will read to you verbatim how he described this woman. A peculiar lady, to say the very least, of the new age, happy-clappy, wanna-blessed-be variety, whose own contribution to the show was mercifully absent from the broadcast edit. Oh, gets better. Most likely because she had been so obviously using alternative pharmacology in order to squeegee her third eye and broaden her spiritual consciousness. In short, she was stoned out of her box on Colombian dancing powder.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Well, that's quite something.
I really appreciated his lyricism.
I know, I like that.
It was beautifully told. And the way he tells it, he's got such a good voice for storytelling. It was just, highly recommend you listen. Because I had a great time listening. Now, she claimed that the ghost of the century, the ghost of the soldier that had been heard patrolling even after death, wasn't a soldier at all.
Oh, God.
But a guardian angel.
Um,
That was her belief.
Just throwing it in there.
Mm-hmm. Not a ghost, a guardian angel.
Oh, I don't like mediums, as it comes up over and over again. But like, she's just saying her thoughts and just believing them as truth. Just, oh, this popped into my head. This must be true. Like, what even is that? Like, especially if you've been partaking of some Colombian marching powder.
Oh. It doesn't strengthen your case.
No. No.
However, in his episode, David goes on to talk about a fire that happened in 1855, which might give the medium's guardian angel theory some merit. And I didn't talk about the fire in the history portion, because this is part of the spook. A soldier with the surname Fox. The irony is real here.
Yep. First name Wiley.
He's the reason the fire started.
Ooh.
Fox. In King James VI Palace, Fox set the fires in the King's Old Building.
Oh, I get it. I didn't get it before. I get it now.
Fawkes.
Yeah, in my head it was
Fire. Boom.
Yeah, I'm with you.
His job, he was a soldier, his job was to set the fires in the King's Old Building. Again, that's where the military museum is now. Mm-hmm. That was his job, so that when the officers came to their rooms, to their quarters, it would be warm for them.
Yep, fair.
He cut corners. He set the fires one night without clearing them out properly first. And if you're not familiar, this means that he piled a whole heap of new coal and things to set the fires on top of ashes that were already there, which is a big no-no. You shouldn't do that because everything can spill out, basically.
Oh, that makes sense.
It can spill out while it's on fire, or it just doesn't take well, or there's a whole load of things that can go wrong. He set the fires, but when the officers got to their quarters that night, the whole building was on fire.
Good job. Nice.
What was even worse was the wind was blowing the flames towards the gunpowder battery.
Ooh.
Where they kept all of the explosive gunpowder. Hence the irony. Fox.
Yeah.
Boom. Now, a man called Charles Hames is the hero of this story. He was in charge of the armoury, and he knew the devastating impact that all this gunpowder exploding would have. It's not good.
Blowing up the castle.
Yeah. Would have killed lots of people.
Yeah.
And he was incredibly selfless. Instead of fleeing the scene and saving himself, he led the efforts to put out the fire before it reached the gunpowder and soaking everything so that if the fire did reach the explosive part of the building, it wouldn't catch and it wouldn't explode. Now, he survived the night, but the conditions were terrible, and by morning he fell into a coma, exposed to all the heat and the flame and the ash and the smoke. It's not healthy at all. It's not good. And unfortunately, he never woke up again.
Oh.
He died, and he was buried in a military graveyard that was at Stirling Castle that doesn't actually exist anymore.
Oh.
The cemetery that he was buried in was called the Pithy Mary. But all the graves were moved to an unknown location.
Oh.
Nobody knows where they were put.
That's weird.
And now, at the site where the Pithy Mary cemetery was, only one man is buried. A man called William Drummond, who was the man who ordered the remodel of the cemetery and the move of all of those graves.
Weird.
So he's taken the plot for himself.
Yeah, that's right.
Class A way of having a place be haunted. Lifting graves and not telling anybody where you've reburied them.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that he had the graves removed was so he could build a monument to the Covenanters, which is known as the Star Pyramid.
Oh.
Or Salem Rock.
That we saw.
Yes. You remember?
I do remember, yeah.
It's a huge, big, imposing pyramid built on one side of the cemetery. He had all of these graves moved, this military cemetery, so that he could build a pyramid.
Well, that's a bit weird.
And now no one knows where they are. And he's the only one buried there.
That hurts my brain.
This is why I was saying that Old Town Cemetery could be its own episode.
Yeah.
It's absolutely bizarre.
Oh.
I'll try and have a photo up on Instagram that I took of the pyramid.
Oh.
Because it's wild.
Yeah.
But back to the guardian angel and the ghost.
Yep.
What if the medium was onto something? What if Hames is one of the spectres haunting the castle?
No.
What if?
No, she wasn't on something.
What?
No.
Well, what about me? What if I'm on? There's a link.
Something.
What if I'm onto something?
Maybe.
Because lots of people have seen figures and shadows wandering around the outside of the King's old building, and they keep saying that they look like soldiers. So maybe he's still patrolling.
Maybe.
He saved the castle. He saved so many people.
I think if you saw him as a ghost, he would be running past with a bucket of water going, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. And you just like,
Charlie.
What was that? Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit.
Incredibly brave.
Yes.
Incredibly brave, because he saved an awful lot of people by not letting it burst into flame.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have one last story to tell you. One last ghosty. And this is a good one. Because for this one, there's photographic evidence.
Oh.
Which is always fun. It's always exciting. A ghost of a soldier in Highlander garb has been seen in multiple places over multiple years around the castle.
Very cool.
Now, one of the places he's seen most often is down near the dungeons. And apparently he turns and he walks through a wall where a door used to be. That's since been bricked over. So this is another ghost that's walking a route that doesn't exist anymore. And to some people who've seen him, he seems so real and so solid that they've mistaken him for a tour guide. That they've asked him questions.
Very nice.
Now, David had a couple of stories about his tours and the Kilted Highlander, so I'm going to tell you them now. There was a woman who was down in the bottom of Elphinstone Tower, which we talked about earlier. It used to be a tower, but now there's only the bottom. She was down there and the power went out. So she was sent into complete darkness at the bottom of this scary tower. And she couldn't find the stairs to get out again, and she started to panic. because she didn't know what happened to the power. She had no way of getting out. I would freak out. I wouldn't like that.
Fair.
To her relief, a man showed up and led her out of the building, back into the daylight, up the stairs. And he was a kilted man, so she assumed that he was working with the tour.
She didn't just immediately find him hot and be like, oh, damn, this guy.
Maybe, I don't know.
Maybe that also happened.
But she assumed that he was working at the castle as like one of the costume actors. Like we saw a few costume guides and actors who were working at the castle. She assumed that he was one of them. Mm-hmm. And when she turned to thank him because she was so relieved at not being in the dark anymore, he had gone.
Crazy.
And he was nowhere to be found. It's like he was never there. But she was sure someone had helped her out of the tower.
I always like those stories. I like those ghost stories where the ghost helps out.
Yeah.
Like dolphins helping people lost at sea. You know, it's just nice.
Mm-hmm. That's the kind of ghost I hope I would meet.
Yep.
But I don't know if it would be scarier having met a ghost that seems so real you thought it was a person.
I think if I were to ever meet a ghost, it would be have knuckle dusters like slapping into his fist, being like, oh, believe this, pal, and then beat me up.
Your reputation preceded you and they're just out to get you. To teach you a lesson. Show us some damn respect. Another story that David told was about a woman who was taking his tour around the castle. Mm-hmm. She was a woman from Nebraska and she was desperate for a pee. So she split from the group to go find the toilets. And she got lost before long. She couldn't find them. And she encountered a kilted guide. Mm. And she asked for directions to the loos. But he didn't answer her. And she started to pester him because she has to pee. Yeah. Like, can you please tell me where the bathrooms are? I need to go. And she was getting frustrated at being ignored. She was getting more and more agitated. But he still didn't answer her. He didn't say anything. He even started walking away from her, just leaving her where they had been standing. So she followed him for a while, and then he turned a corner and just kind of disappeared. Mm. But she noticed that the bathrooms were nearby. She could see them, so she went to the bathroom. And she didn't see him after this. So she had her pee, and she made her way back to David and started complaining about his kilted staff member because he'd been so rude and so unhelpful and had just abandoned her near the toilets without saying anything. But David had to tell her that he didn't have a guide who was wearing that. She described him as being kilted, but in like Victorian military uniform.
Oh yeah, yep.
Not the Jacobite kilt costumes that David and his guides had been wearing that day.
Well, that would be off-putting, wouldn't it? You'd almost like not believe him. There's no stop. Like
there's no. I know that he's here.
Yeah, like the woman. But stop fucking with me. Like I was talking to your friend. Like, I know like ghosts and everything.
Like, I'm annoyed. I want you to listen to me.
Like, I'm leaving a complaint. Can you imagine her leaving like the bad TripAdvisor review?
Well, she came round to the idea it was a ghost, but apparently she turned up for David's ghost walk that night and expected a discount for what had happened to her that day because she had met a ghost.
What? People are... Oh. What happens
he talks
to your
about
brain
it in
when
the
you
episode.
go on holiday?
She wanted a discount. So, well, I met a ghost. I should get this cheaper.
Yeah, I've given you a ghost story. Come on. Where's my discount? I'm like, well, what did you want from this ghost tour?
I know.
It's not half off when you meet a ghost.
I don't think that was the ghost tour. I think that was just a tour of the castle that she was doing. And then, because David does tours around, like, Old Town Stirling. So she joined him for that tour later and wanted a discount.
Bananas.
So, stories of a kilted ghost. Way back in 1935, an architect who was either working or preparing to work on the castle was taking photos on the request of the castle governor, who was a man called Lieutenant General Sir Humphrey Gale.
That's a title.
I know, Humphrey.
Yeah.
The architect was taking photos, and he made a special effort to take photos of the castle while it was empty. In 1935, it was still a military base, and he didn't want lots of soldiers in the photos. He wanted it to be strictly of the building, because he was going to be doing work. So he made a special effort to get up at the crack of dawn, first thing in the morning, like 6 a.m., and take photos when the castle was empty. Now, he was taking his photos, he was going around, and he took a photo of one of the archways of the castle. And it runs between two main parts. You remember, we were there. Between like one big courtyard and another. And during the day, it was a really busy thoroughfare because it was two main parts of the castle. So soldiers were going through it all the time. At this point, it was empty. He had put in the effort to have it empty of soldiers. When he looked at his developed photos later, he saw a figure walking through the archway. Now, he was absolutely certain no one had been there when he took it, because he knew he had gone to so much effort to avoid people. He would have remembered if someone was in the shot, because he thought he was on his own. But it really looks like there's a figure walking under the arch, but you can see right through them.
It does. I've seen this photo.
It's spooky.
It's quite spooky.
We recreated it when we went to the castle.
I stood in my spookiest stance.
Your spookiest orange jacket. Now, lots of theories have been put forward to explain the photograph, as you'd expect. The first theory is that Sir Humphrey really enjoyed jokes and pranks. According to David, Sir Humphrey was known for replacing the wine in the officers' decanters in the mess with prune juice or vinegar.
Oh.
Which I just think would be awful.
That would be.
So it's possible that he just wanted the photo to wind everyone up with.
Can you imagine just like replacing it and then that being not just your superior, but your superior, if he's a lieutenant general, and having to laugh every time. Oh,
no.
Yeah, got me again, sir. Yeah, good. Do you want me to laugh? For permission to laugh? Oh, yeah, yeah.
I've got the runs again.
Yeah. Yep. Oh,
Good one.
Never gets old. Yep. Oh, there's the kick me sign. Yep. Oh, very good.
Counter to that theory, though, the photo didn't reach the public eye until after Sir Humphrey had died. He kept it secret. It was in his possession until his death. So it didn't have the impact of a practical joke because no one knew about it.
Yeah.
So surely if you wanted to have this photo taken as a joke, you would show it to people who were there at the time.
Yeah.
So that you could see their faces.
Does seem likely.
Because it would be an awfully long game to play to have it secretly in your possession and just hope that somebody finds it.
Counterpoint. I have a small bag of marbles in my top drawer that I've had for
10 years?
More than that. I've had them for like 14 years because I got them in a Christmas cracker. And it's the longest.
And tell the people why you have them.
Well, because I don't want to lose my marbles. And I've had I can even jangle them for proof. I got these in a Christmas cracker one Christmas and thought it was funny, and I've committed to this joke.
Fully committed.
Fully committed. I hope not lost them.
Kieran's just emptying his entire desk drawer on the table.
A little bag of marbles.
That is the sound of marbles.
Yep, that's the sound marbles make.
They're even in the little plastic net that you get in a Christmas cracker. You don't even keep them in anything nice.
These are my marbles. Don't let me lose them.
I don't think people are going to believe this when they hear it. This has been such a weird and silly episode.
He's feverish, isn't he? So, commitment to a joke.
Yes, that's very true. Very true. I'm not saying that he didn't do it.
Yep.
But just that was when the photo reached the public eye. It was after he had died. So he didn't get to see the payoff, if that's true. What he wanted.
And, it doesn't come up that I have my marbles nearly often enough.
You take any excuse. You look very happy that you got to talk about it.
I do. I haven't been able to talk about those in years. Still got them, though.
Now, looking at the photo and looking at people's analysis of the photo, because I don't really know what I'm looking at, apparently it doesn't have the telltale signs of a double exposure photo. So, where you can layer photos on top of each other.
Well, that's kind of what I thought. There was a long exposure and someone walked in and walked out.
Well, I think double exposure is when you take two photos.
Oh, okay.
And you can develop them together, I think. Or you take one photo and then...
You take a photo on top of it or something?
Yeah. Is it obvious that I don't do photography of any kind? But apparently this doesn't have the telltale signs of that because it's not blurry in the way that those photos normally are, because they don't usually line up exactly. So there's a bit of blurring, and this doesn't have that. And when the negative was examined, the figure was in the negative, so it's not been tampered with after the fact.
Oh, okay. That's
like
interesting.
after it's been developed. There was something when the photo was taken, because it's in the negative.
That's cool. I like that.
Apparently. I don't know, because I'm not an expert on photography by any means. That's just what
Who knows?
I've looked into. Now, the photo was given to the military museum of the castle in 1992. And no one's really sure how to explain it. They don't really know. Some people think that this is the ghost of Charles Hames, the hero of 1855.
Maybe.
But he's the kilted man, the kilted Highlander.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I don't think we saw the photo. I don't think it's on display in the museum.
I didn't see it on display. I had a look for it because I was going to show you, because I had forced you to recreate the photo for me. I was going to show you the original. I've since shown you.
Yeah, you showed me the picture.
And it'll be up on Instagram. It's already there, but I'll put it up again. I didn't see it in the museum, so I don't know if it's been moved or if we just missed it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But like I said, we did go in and recreate it. And the visibility is good in the arch. So if someone was about to walk in and disturb your shot, you would know. I don't think someone could just appear on you and ruin it.
Don't know.
You would see someone approaching and then walking in, if that makes sense. They wouldn't really be able to round a corner and then disturb your photo.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't really know how to explain it. I think it's pretty good. What do you think of the photo?
I mean, it's a pretty weird photo.
I mean, you're the subject of your own ghost photo, so you're an expert opinion.
Well, that orange jacketed guy looks pretty weird.
It's a bit dodgy.
Pretty messed up.
A bit sus.
Definitely like a zombie or something. That's my input.
Not even going to comment on the.
Oh, the ghost photo. Oh,
yes.
I mean, it's pretty weird. I don't know what it is. It doesn't compel me that it's a ghost particularly.
No, it's just strange because it does look like a figure.
Yeah,
and weirdly, I can see it being a kilted figure.
I didn't notice the kilt.
I can see it in the silhouette. Like, it does seem that way.
Yeah, I just sort of noticed the feet, and there's this kind of head and arm.
Yeah,
he looks like he's leaning really weird.
He looks like he's kind of crouched forward, I think.
I thought it looked like he was leaning back.
Well, that is the story of Stirling Castle. What did you think of the story? We've been here for nearly 3 hours.
Oh, that was a good one. That was a long one, but that was a very interesting.
There's a lot of history. And there was a lot of history I just skimmed over.
A lot of good, interesting history. I, for one, want a season on the Wars of Independence.
I really want to do it too.
I think that sounds very cool.
I don't know. Maybe I have plans. I'm neurotic. I have plans for season 4. I have episodes lined up that I want to do because it's spooky season.
Spooky season.
So I like saving the super spooky episodes for spooky season.
Super spooky.
Maybe next year. Maybe we could do a season on the Wars of Independence.
That would be very cool, wouldn't it?
If you like this idea, please let us know. Leave us a comment somewhere. Get in touch. Even email us. Because knowing what you want to hear will be very useful.
Yes, that would be good.
If you would like a sort of one-off season on the Wars of Independence, let us know. Because I'm quite happy to do it. I think it'd be good. I think it would let me go into the detail that I think it deserves. Because if this is a Scottish history podcast, that's a very major period of Scottish history.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I think we shall leave it there.
Yes, I would quite like to take some medicine and get quite a lot of sleep.
That sounds pretty good. Well, we have to get a little blether for Patreon.
Yeah, I know.
So
I can sleep. You can do that. So you don't need me.
All you awesome Patreon people, we'll see you shortly.
Yes, we will see you in like 5 minutes.
And all you awesome people who just listened to the podcast, we hope you enjoyed.
Yes, and we appreciate you.
And we'll see you for next week's episode.
Yes, we are hoping to be better and well by then.
Hopefully we'll sound better.
Apologies if our voices have annoyed you for these past few hours.
I know.
But we will speak to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.